Chapter 297 Invitation from the Young Master. Chapter 297 Invitation from the Young Master. Now that everything was as such, perfected being Kang Lang naturally could not stay any longer. With a darkened expression, he turned to leave with his two disciples. As perfected being Kang Lang left, the many surrounding cultivators began to disperse as well. In a small alley, a coachman drove a horse carriage into the distance. Outside the crowd, Ji Yaoxue and Bai Yuhan stood at the side, looking emotional after witnessing the entire auction. Bai Yuhan said, "Did you see that? Mr. Mo played with perfected being Kang Lang in the palms of his hands without even making an appearance such that the latter could only leave in shame." Ji Yaoxue nodded as a look of appreciation flashed in her eyes. Mr. Mo is indeed impressive. He expected all of perfected being Kang Lang's reactions beforehand and dealt with it. Pausing for a moment, Ji Yaoxue smiled. If father had not told me that he's only a young man in his 20s, I would have thought that it was some scheming old man. Fu. Bai Yuhan looked at Ji Yaoxue slyly and chuckled. Why? Are you starting to get curious about Mr. Mo? Ji Yaoxue shook her head and smiled helplessly. Don't worry, when you see Mr. Mo later on, you will forget that Su Zimo cleanly, Bai Yuhan assured her. Just as the two of them conversed, perfected being Yi Ning had already handed Nian Qi a storage bag with 30 sets of materials and 2 million superior-grade spirit stones for the supreme-grade spirit weapon. Ji Yaoxue and Bai Yuhan headed towards Mo's spirit weapon workshop. Perfected being Yi Ning seemed to have said something to Nian Qi, causing the latter to shake her head. That had perfected being Yi Ning turning to leave with a disappointed look. Greetings, Master. Ji Yaoxue happened to approach and bowed slightly, greeting in a gentle voice. Although Ji Yaoxue was dressed ordinarily right now and bowed towards perfected being Yi Ning, she exuded an air of royalty from head to toe that was extremely noble. Ah, Yaoxue. You don't have to bow. Perfected being Yi Ning nodded and stretched her hands to help Ji Yaoxue up. While the disciples of Azure Frost sect did not know of Ji Yaoxue's identity, she knew. Ji Yaoxue was only at Azure Frost sect to cultivate for 10 years. Thereafter, she would return to the capital of Great Ju for the sect competition and she would never return to Azure Frost sect ever again. In fact, now that Ji Yaoxue had returned to the capital, her status as a princess was already reverted. Congratulations, Master. Ji Yaoxue smiled and said. Fu. Perfected being Yi Ning could not hide the joy in her eyes as she chuckled. It's a freak accident and totally by fate. Who would have thought that Mr. Mo would have chosen me in the end? Bai Yuhan asked, what did you say to Nian Qi earlier on, fellow Daoist Yi Ning? I wanted to meet Mr. Mo to thank him in person, but he didn't agree and rejected me right away. Perfected being Yi Ning smiled bitterly. Ji Yaoxue consoled her. From what fellow Daoist Nian Qi said, Mr. Mo will appear for the sect competition. You'll definitely see him then. Yes, I hope so. The three of them chatted for a while before perfected being Yi Ning left. Ji Yaoxue turned around and smiled. See, the #1 weapon refinement master of the Great Ju dynasty is not someone you can meet at any moment. Even my master was given the cold shoulder. We'll just give it a try. Who knows, we might succeed. Bai Yuhan joked, at the very most, we'll just announce your title as the third princess and we might be able to change the situation. Sister Bai, you're teasing me again. Ji Yaoxue shook her head and laughed. The two of them walked up and Bai Yuhan knocked on the door. Before long, the door opened to the knock and Nian Qi poked her head out. She looked at Ji Yaoxue and Bai Yuhan curiously with her big, sparkling eyes. The auction has already ended. Fellow Daoists, you are late. Ji Yaoxue smiled gently. Fellow Daoist, we're not here for the auction. The Emperor customized a supreme-grade spirit weapon through Mr. Mo previously and I'm here to collect it. Oh. Nian Qi came to a sudden realization as she looked at Bai Yuhan. She recalled that this was the commander of the White Hawk Guards. Since this yellow-robed lady was with Bai Yuhan, there should be no mistake. Please wait a moment. The supreme-grade spirit weapon is with our young master. I'll retrieve it right away. Nyan Qi said and was about to close the door. Hey. Bai Yuhan held Nyan Qi back when she saw that Ji Yaoshua was looking indifferent and did not mention anything about wanting to meet Mo Ling. Coughing softly, she said, "Fellow Daoist Nyan Qi, can we enter with you and visit Mr. Mo? After all, we've been admiring him for a long time." Nopes. Nyan Qi shook her head without thinking. Pausing for a moment, she looked at Bai Yuhan and asked confusedly, "Commander Bai, haven't you met my young master before?" "I did, but she hasn't." Bai Yuhan pointed at Ji Yaoshua who was beside her. "Nope still." Nyan Qi still shook her head and closed the door. "Right, she's the third princess of the Great Zhou dynasty." "Hey," Bai Yuhan hurriedly called out, not knowing if Nyan Qi heard her. Ji Yaoshua could not help but laugh. "Sister Bai, stop shouting. Don't you find it embarrassing when they're ignoring you?" "I do." Bai Yuhan pouted. "If he doesn't want to meet us, so be it. What's so great about him?" After a while, the door opened once more and Nyan Qi appeared in a flash, looking at Ji Yaoshua with a curious expression. "Where's the supreme grade spirit weapon? We'll leave after taking it." Bai Yuhan felt indignant after being rejected twice in a row by Nyan Qi. Nyan Qi said, "The spirit weapon is with our young master." Frowning, Bai Yuhan asked, "Then what were you doing just now?" Nyan Qi bowed slightly and made an inviting gesture as she smiled gently. "Our young master invites you in." Both Ji Yaoshua and Bai Yuhan were stunned. The two of them originally thought that they would never be able to meet Mr. Mo. But now, things had taken a sudden spin. Mr. Mo's thoughts were truly unfathomable. Ji Yaoshua was rather calm and composed. To her, it did not matter whether or not she met him. However, Bai Yuhan smiled delightedly as she pulled Ji Yaoshua's wrist while urging, "Let's go." This is a rare opportunity. Under Nyan Qi's lead, the two of them entered the residence hailed as the most mysterious in the capital of Great Zhou. The houses in the courtyard were neat and tidy and the courtyard itself was clean with the lawn neatly arranged. Not far away, there was a stone table and a couple of stone stools. Apart from those, there was nothing else. On the shore beside Jishire River, a large black dog that was covered in scales sprawled down, seemingly resting with its eyes closed. "Please have a seat." Nyan Qi led the two of them to the stone table where there was already a pot of tea. It was emitting steam and a fragrant aroma. Ji Yaoshua and Bai Yuhan sat down where they were served a cup of tea each by Nyan Qi. Bai Yuhan felt uneasy seeing Nyan Qi like this. While Nyan Qi seemed like she was a maidservant on the surface, there were not many cultivators in the capital of Great Zhou that could have her pouring tea for them. "Sister Yaoshua, it's really you." Suddenly, an exclamation sounded nearby. Ji Yaoshua turned around and saw Su Xiaoning sprinting towards her with a delighted expression. "Xiaoning, why are you here?" Ji Yaoshua was stunned. Right then, another voice rang out, gentle as jade. "Miss Ji, how have you been?" Chapter 298, You Are Mr. Mo. Chapter 298, You Are Mr. Mo. Ji Yaoshua's petite body shuddered slightly as she turned around. Not far away, a delicate and scholarly cultivator strode over. He wore green robes that fluttered gently in the wind and he had clear eyes with a faint smile on his face. Ji Yaoshua was stunned, stuck in a trance for a long time. For some reason, she felt a lump in her throat as tears welled up in her eyes. That figure had appeared in her mind countless times. Yet, now that she actually saw it, everything felt surreal. It was as though everything else was silent as the only thing reverberating in her ears was that sentence. "Miss Ji, how have you been?" "You're good. So, you knew Mr. Mo long ago but you've kept it so well hidden from me." Bai Yuhan leaned in and whispered to Ji Yaoshua. When she heard that, Ji Yaoshua gradually returned to her senses. By then, the green-robed man was already close to her. "Greetings, Mr. Mo." Bai Yuhan stood up immediately and cupped her fists. The green-robed man merely nodded. He shifted his gaze and looked at Ji Yaoshua's beautiful face again with a smile in his eyes. Bai Yuhan looked at Ji Yaoshua, then back at the green-robed man. She was confused. If they knew each other, why were they not saying anything? If they did not know each other, what did Mr. Mo mean by that question earlier? You are Mr. Mo. After a while, Ji Yaoshua finally spoke. I think so. The green-robed man nodded. Should I call you young Master Su, Mr. Mo, or Zimo? As you wish. As soon as he said that, the two of them looked at one another and smiled as though telepathically, just like before. Have a seat. Su Zimo pointed to the stone stool beside him and sat down with Ji Yaoshua. Bai Yuhan stood rooted to the ground, still in a daze. What young Master Su? What Zimo? Bai Yuhan turned around and hurried to Ji Yaoshua's side, asking in confusion, Yaoshua, what did you mean by young Master Su and Zimo earlier on? This is Mo Ling. Mr. Mo. Ji Yaoshua smiled without saying anything and turned to look at Su Zimo. Glancing at Bai Yuhan, Su Zimo said frankly, let's get to know each other again. I am Su Zimo. Which Su Zimo? Bai Yuhan was a little confused and asked subconsciously. Su Zimo of Yang country. Ah. Bai Yuhan exclaimed and her face was filled with disbelief. You're that useless Su Zimo who has no spirit root and is unable to cultivate. At the mention of the word useless, Ji Yaoshua frowned. She glanced sideways and said softly, Sister Bai. Nian Qi was displeased and could not help but blurt, Commander Bai, how can you say something like that? If my young master is useless, who isn't useless in this world? How is this possible? For a moment, Bai Yuhan was unable to accept the truth as her eyes darted between Su Zimo, Ji Yaoshua, Nian Qi, and Su Xiaoning. None of them seemed like they were joking. In Bai Yuhan's memories, Su Zimo from Yang country and Mr. Mo who was before her were from completely different world. One was high up in the heavens. As the #1 weapon refinement master of the Great Zhou dynasty, he was renowned and almost all golden cores wanted to befriend him. The other was far down on the ground. Born from a small vassal state far away, he had no spirit root and was unable to cultivate a most common mortal. How did the two people become one? Su Zimo smiled and replied indifferently, that's right, there are many impossible things in this world. Ji Yaoshua changed the topic and asked curiously, why are you called Mo Ling? Su Zimo pointed to the plaque above the door. Mo Ling is merely the name of the weapon workshop. However, others instinctively thought that it was my name. Because I'm too lazy to explain anything, that was how it spread. To think that you've changed so much after not seeing you for a couple of years. You are now Mr. Mo who is renowned throughout the capital and it's difficult to even meet you, Ji Yaoshua teased. Su Zimo laughed as well. You've already reported your title as the third princess of the Great Zhou dynasty, how would I dare to not meet you? Ji Yaoshua covered her mouth and chuckled while rolling her eyes at Bai Yuhan. It's all Sister Bai's fault. In Bai Yuhan's eyes, Ji Yaoshua seemed to have changed into another person ever since she met Su Zimo. The gloominess in her eyes were gone and they were now beautiful like clear waters. She smiled enchantingly with every word and action of hers and was extremely beautiful. Pondering for a moment, Ji Yaoshua continued, right, father has high regards for you as well. Of Mo Ling, you mean? Su Zimo's tone was calm. It's all the same. You're both the same person, Ji Yaoshua replied. Su Zimo smiled but did not say anything. He knew clearly well that if the Emperor of Great Zhou knew that he was Mo Ling, it would be hard to tell the kind of attitude the latter would have towards that fact. The Emperor's heart was unfathomable. If he was enraged, he would be able to find sufficient reason to kill Su Zimo. The supreme-grade spirit weapon that your majesty customized was a gift for you, right? Su Zimo asked. Yes. Ji Yaoshua nodded and extended her palms with a smile. Hand it over. I want to see the quality of a flying sword customized by Mr. Mo and whether it catches my eye. Su Zimo grinned and took out a flying sword from his storage bag. The sword was 3 feet long and about 2 feet wide. It was engraved with mysterious mystical patterns and was breathtaking. It could be described as a work of the gods. Su Zimo injected spirit energy to it. Whoosh! The sword lit up with 4 spirit patterns in a bedazzling manner, a 4-patterned supreme-grade spirit weapon. Bai Yuhan's eyes flashed with envy as she looked at the flying sword. Even though she was the commander of the White Hawk Guards, she did not possess a supreme-grade spirit weapon. Ji Yaoshue received the flying sword with both hands and wiped her fingers across the sword. She could sense the coldness of the sword, but a current of warmth seeped into her heart. Buzz. Brushing her finger against the tip of the sword, Ji Yaoshue flicked it gently and the sword trembled, reverberating with a clear ringing sound. The sound of the sword alone was enough to tell that even amongst supreme-grade spirit weapons, this was definitely a top-notch flying sword and was infinitely close to being a perfect spirit weapon. Su Zimo took out another long pale yellow dress from his storage bag and passed it to Ji Yaoshue. "This dress is for you too." Ji Yaoshue took it. The pale yellow dress was extremely thin and light with a hint of coldness to it. Ji Yaoshue's heart stirred and she injected spirit energy into the dress. Whoosh! 4 rays of light burst from the dress, shining brightly. "Ah!" Both Ji Yaoshue and Bai Yuhan exclaimed at almost the same time. It was another supreme-grade spirit weapon, and it was an extremely rare defensive supreme-grade spirit weapon at that. The cutting of the dress seemed as though it was custom-made for Ji Yaoshue entirely. At that moment, Bai Yuhan was no longer filled with envy, it was jealousy. This was way too extravagant. Who would give away supreme-grade spirit weapons as gifts just like that? Ji Yaoshue lowered her head and pretended to check out the dress in her hands. However, her cheeks were slightly red and her heart was racing. Su Zimo frowned slightly when he noticed Ji Yaoshue's expression. He had only given her the dress because he saw Ji Yaoshue as a good friend. Furthermore, she was his and the Su family's benefactor. Su Zimo did not wish to cause Ji Yaoshue's misunderstanding. After pondering for a moment, he said in a seemingly casual manner, "I just bought some 1,000-year-old sky silk recently and made them into 3 dresses. Apart from you, Xiaoning and Nian Qi each have one too." When she heard that, Ji Yaoshue's eyes dimmed. However, she recovered very quickly and was smiling by the time she raised her head. "Thank you very much then." Chapter 299, Hongmen Banquet. Chapter 299, Hongmen Banquet. Xiaoning blinked and could tell that there was something wrong between the two of them. Thus, she held Ji Yaoshue's hand and smiled. "Sister Yaoshue, why have you only just returned?" "I've missed you." Ji Yaoshue rubbed Xiaoning's forehead and asked tenderly, "How are you doing in Azure Frost Elixir Workshop? Did anyone bully you?" Su Xiaoning froze momentarily and averted her gaze while smiling. "No, all the seniors are taking good care of me." Ji Yaoshue hummed softly. While Xiaoning had hidden herself well, Ji Yaoshue still found some contradictions. She turned to look at Su Zimo and asked with a frown, "Zimo, what happened?" "Nothing much, Sister Yaoshue." "Stop asking," Su Xiaoning added hurriedly. Ji Yaoshue smiled faintly. "Even if you and your brother refuse to tell me, is there anything that can be hidden from me within the Great Zhu dynasty if I want to know about it?" "It's nothing much. There's just a cultivator in Azure Frost Elixir Workshop called Yang Yu who has a feud with you, I guess." Su Zimo spoke but did not elaborate. Back in Azure Frost Elixir Workshop, he had already told Yang Yu that someone would deal with her. "It's her." There was a cold glint in Ji Yaoshue's eyes as her aura changed immediately. "I've already warned that Yang Yu not to provoke me anymore." It was only at this moment that a unique sense of royalty dignity and ferociousness was exuded from Ji Yaoshue. Her body carried the bloodline of the emperor after all. That was someone who could smite 1,000,000 corpses in a fit of anger. Right then, a red dot flew over from the void not far away. It was extremely fast and was headed towards Mo Spirit Weapon Workshop. Bai Yuhan frowned. "It's the Scarlet Vulture Guards. What are they coming over for?" Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he vaguely guessed something. Not long after, several dozen Scarlet Vulture Guards descended outside Mo Spirit Weapon Workshop and the leader of the group was a bald man with no eyebrows. He was none other than the commander of the Scarlet Vulture Guards, Bald Vulture. Bald Vulture rode on a Scarlet Vulture expressionlessly and cupped his fists. "Your Majesty has given orders for the 3rd princess to return to the palace. Also, Your Majesty is holding a banquet at the Rain Admiration Pavilion and Mr. Mo is invited to it." Ji Yaoshue frowned. She could tell that something was amiss through Bald Vulture's eyes. "Commander Bald Vulture, did father mention why he is setting up a banquet for Mr. Mo?" Ji Yaoshua's eyes sparkled as she stared into Bald Vulture's eyes and asked with a raised voice. Bald Vulture bowed slightly and averted Ji Yaoshua's gaze. I don't know. Ji Yaoshua's heart sank. She had grown up in the palace since she was a child and knew everything about it. She could sense a faint killing intent emanating from Bald Vulture. That killing intent was definitely not directed at her. It went without saying who it was directed to. Don't go. Ji Yaoshua turned around and shook her head at Su Zimo with a grave expression. Su Zimo smiled calmly. In truth, he had expected this day to arrive. When he acknowledged Su Xiaoning in the capital more than a month ago, he had already expected that given the emperor's intellect, it was only a matter of time before the latter discovered his true identity. Furthermore, there was no way he could hide his identity at the sect competition. Su Zimo had not intended to hide it either. Now that the emperor had set up a banquet and the Scarlet Vulture guards had appeared, it was basically confirmation that his identity had already been exposed. This was clearly a Hongmen banquet. However, Su Zimo had to attend it. This was the capital of Great Ju. He had no other choice. I'll accompany you. Ji Yaoshua had also realized that even if Su Zimo were to reject the invitation, the Scarlet Vulture guards were going to bring him along forcefully. By then, things might get worse. You guys stay here and await my return. Don't worry. Su Zimo turned around and reminded Nian Qi and Xiaoning before glancing at Night Spirit who was sprawled in a corner. Let's go. Su Zimo, Ji Yaoshua, and Bai Yuhan each got onto a Scarlet Vulture and sped towards the palace under Bald Vulture's lead. After a while, everyone arrived at the palace. Flying was forbidden within the palace and everyone got down from the Scarlet Vultures. Bald Vulture bowed. Third Princess, please head back. I'll lead Mr. Mo to the banquet right now. I'm coming along as well. Even though Ji Yaoshua's tone was calm, it was unquestionable. Bald Vulture frowned darkly and said in a low voice, Third Princess, please don't make things difficult for me. I'm only following orders. Oh. Ji Yaoshua asked indifferently, you have objections towards me making things difficult for you? Instantly, Bald Vulture's heart skipped a beat as he replied hurriedly, I wouldn't dare. Turning around, Ji Yaoshua's gaze was sharp and intimidating as she questioned, your orders are to bring Mr. Mo with you. How am I conflicting with your orders by following along? Bald Vulture was speechless. Within the palace of Great Ju, Ji Yaoshua seemed to have transformed into a different person as she revealed her prowess and displayed a unique sense of dominance and royal dignity. Ji Yaoshua asked again, I've just returned from Azure Frost Sect and haven't had dinner with father for a long time. Now that he's hosting a banquet today and I want to join him for a meal, you're trying to stop me? I wouldn't dare. Bald Vulture found himself breaking out in cold sweat against Ji Yaoshua's 3 consecutive questions. Ji Yaoshua waved her hands. Lead the way. Yes. After a moment of hesitation, Bald Vulture glared at Su Zimo gloomily before nodding his head reluctantly. Everyone headed towards the Rain Admiration Pavilion. Before long, they arrived at the entrance of the Rain Admiration Pavilion. On the small path in the middle of the pool, cold-looking Imperial Army soldiers guarded both sides. They wielded long sabers and axes while exuding a faint scent of bloodlust. These were truly Imperial Army soldiers who had experienced battle and undergone a baptism of blood. The cultivation of these Imperial Army soldiers were at perfected foundation establishment. They were above Su Zimo. As for how many meridians they had unlocked, the spirit-peering art could not reveal that. The remaining Scarlet Vulture guards remained outside while Su Zimo, Ji Yaoshua, Bald Vulture, and Bai Yuhan passed the Emperor's Imperial Army and entered the Rain Admiration Pavilion. The moment they entered, Su Zimo felt a murderous aura. A ring of cultivators surrounded the Rain Admiration Pavilion, all of them at Golden Core Realm. They glared at Su Zimo with cold, expressionless eyes. Within the Rain Admiration Pavilion, a table was set in the middle with exquisite dishes that were still emitting steam displayed. A noble middle-aged man dressed in the Emperor's robes sat in the seat opposite the entrance. His forehead was wide and he had a gaze deep as water where his emotions were impossible to read. The Emperor of Great Ju. The Emperor's gaze was fixed on Su Zimo's face, lingering for the longest time as though he was scrutinizing to determine carefully just who this green-robed scholar was. Coupled with the fact that he had ascended the throne for a long time, the emperor's razor-sharp gaze naturally carried an authority that looked down on the masses such that even cultivators would not dare to meet it head-on. However, Su Zimo's expression was calm and he met the emperor's gaze without any intention of avoiding it at all. Perhaps Su Zimo might have felt a little guilty if this was in the past. However, he had ascended to fame and gathered influence in the past 3 years under the name of Mo Ling. In addition, Su Zimo was someone with an innate sharpness to begin with. Even the emperor's authority was not enough to suppress someone like him. Chapter 300 Unsolvable Trap. Chapter 300 Unsolvable Trap. The emperor retracted his gaze from Su Zimo and instantly, the suppressive feeling earlier on disappeared as though everything was just a hallucination. Come here, Shuai. Turning his head slightly, the emperor looked at Ji Yaoxue and smiled while beckoning with his hand. Ji Yaoxue frowned slightly and did not budge. The emperor asked with a smile, "What's wrong? You don't wish to have a meal with your father?" At that moment, the emperor had a kind and benevolent expression as he looked at Ji Yaoxue endearingly. He looked completely like a slightly aged father. While Su Zimo could not sense any killing intent or enmity from the emperor, his spirit perception told him that this person was extremely dangerous. Furthermore, he was at the edge of life and death. Ji Yaoxue hesitated for a moment before she walked over slowly and sat down beside the emperor as per his intentions. "Father, Mr. Mo, let's eat." He interrupted her before she could continue. Although his tone was calm, it was impossible to rebut him. With that said, the emperor started eating the dishes on the table as if no one else was around. He ate elegantly and chewed slowly without letting out any sound. At that moment, even Ji Yaoxue could not figure out the emperor's thoughts. She glanced at Su Zimo, feeling perturbed. While she looked like she was eating as well, everything tasted like wax to her. In the Rain Admiration Pavilion, Su Zimo seemed to have become an extra person. The emperor seemed to have forgotten about him as he was left standing on the spot. Su Zimo smiled calmly and was not vexed. With one hand behind his back, he strolled to the side and looked at the pleasant scenery outside in a leisurely manner. Time passed bit by bit. The Rain Admiration Pavilion was silent and Su Zimo seemed to be completely immersed in the beautiful scenery, forgetting everything around him. At that moment, Bai Yuhan nodded her head with admiration. Not everyone could remain this calm before the emperor of Great Ju. After a long while, the emperor wiped his mouth and a chilling glint flashed across his eyes. Ji Yaoxue put down her utensils and coughed lightly. "Take it away." In part, Ji Yaoxue was summoning the maidservant to take the dishes away. At the same time, it was a reminder for Su Zimo. He gradually came back to his senses and returned to stand not far away from the emperor. "Should I call you Mr. Mo, or Su Zimo?" The emperor spoke suddenly and asked directly without beating around the bush. Su Zimo replied, "Both works. It depends on which one your majesty prefers." Bang! The emperor's palm struck the table heavily all of a sudden, giving off a loud bang. Ji Yaoxue was shocked. "Su Zimo, are you aware of your crimes?" The emperor slapped the table and stood up. Instantly, his aura changed completely, as though he was an angry lion that was gushing forth with an immensely intimidating pressure. Those words were deafening like the sound of a huge bell. Su Zimo's body swayed. Against the pressure of the emperor, he felt like he was suffocating. His security was at stake now and his head could fall at any moment. "Father," Ji Yaoxue's expression changed as she stood up hurriedly. "Don't interfere in this matter." The emperor did not even look at her as he waved his sleeves gently, sending Ji Yaoxue to the side. Ji Yaoxue did not know what spell he used, but she could not move her body at all. While she was agitated and her eyes revealed endless worry, she could not speak at all. Su Zimo closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, they were brimming with a dazzling light of life. "What are my crimes?" Su Zimo asked instead. The emperor's gaze was dark as he said slowly, "You hid your identity in front of me. That's deceiving the emperor and you should be executed." Everyone in the Rain Admiration Pavilion could sense the emperor's killing intent. However, Su Zimo's expression was unchanged as he replied calmly, "Your Majesty, you have never asked me about it." How does that equate to me hiding things from you? Bullshit. The Emperor shouted, back in Mo's spirit weapon workshop. I asked you personally what sect you were from and who your master was. How dare you try to deny now that things have come to this? Su Zimo replied indifferently, that day, your majesty paid a visit in secret. How was I to know of your identity, your majesty? The emperor frowned slightly. Su Zimo's meaning was simple. The source of this matter was not him, but the emperor. Right from the start, the emperor had not inquired about Su Zimo's background using his identity as the emperor. As such, there was naturally no way the latter was deceiving the emperor. No matter what, Su Zimo had saved Ji Yaoshua's life before. Furthermore, his alter ego was Mr. Mo, who was renowned throughout the capital. In terms of both logic and sentimentality, the emperor should not kill Su Zimo. However, the moment the emperor found out about the truth, he felt a sense of shame as though he was played and cheated by someone. He would feel indignant if he were to let Su Zimo leave just like this. He wanted to kill, but he did not want to kill at the same time. The conflict within the emperor's heart had reached an extreme. That was why he had to look for a reason that he could convince himself with if he wanted to kill Su Zimo. Right from the beginning, when Su Zimo entered the Rain Admiration Pavilion, his spirit perception had already sensed the immense reason. That was because the emperor wanted to kill him but lacked a reason. That was also the reason why the emperor left Su Zimo hanging on the spot. As long as Su Zimo did anything unusual, the emperor would strike immediately and kill him on the spot. Normally, someone of Su Zimo's age would be the most brash. Coupled with his title as the #1 weapon refinement master of the Great Ju dynasty, he would definitely be enraged for being ignored as such. He would then either rush up and reason about it or turn to leave. No matter which choice it was, Su Zimo would have definitely died. However, of all things, he was neither angry nor vexed and walked to the side to admire the scenery. Helpless, the emperor could only strike again and accuse him of deceiving the emperor while using that as an excuse to kill him. However, Su Zimo managed to resolve the contradiction within a couple of sentences, leaving the emperor without any reason to refute. Although everything seemed like it was a simple exchange of words, there were swords and sabers lying beneath. A single mistake and Su Zimo's blood would fill the Rain Admiration Pavilion. Ji Yaoshua, who had seen through everything, heaved a sigh of relief and her expression eased slightly. Very good. The emperor nodded expressionlessly and his tone was cold. No one could tell if he was giving a compliment or being sarcastic. Let's leave the matter of deceiving the emperor aside first. The emperor's gaze was cold as he asked in a frosty voice, do you admit that you killed the Imperial Army soldier, Dai Shu? As long as that matter was thoroughly investigated, Su Zimo would definitely be implicated. Back then, Dai Shu had tailed Su Zimo after catching sight of him outside the Rain Admiration Pavilion. The fact that he died that very night made it obvious who the murderer was. Su Zimo pondered for a moment before nodding. I killed him. All right. A cold glint flashed in the emperor's eyes. Since you admit it, there's nothing to say anymore. A life for a life. Raising his head, Su Zimo looked at the emperor and asked, why can't I kill Dai Shu since he wanted to kill me? As long as someone wishes to kill you, you have to kill them in return. The emperor raised his brows. Yes. Su Zimo replied without hesitation. Suddenly, the emperor's eyes narrowed as he slowly asked, then, I want to kill you now. What do you want? Ji Yaoshua shuddered when she heard that question. This was an unsolvable question. No matter how Su Zimo replied, he would be in the wrong. If he displayed weakness and did not dare to rebut, he would be contradicting his previous statement and the emperor could go along with that flow and kill him. If Su Zimo's stance was overly tough and replied that he would kill the emperor, that would be regicide and he would definitely be killed. It was an unsolvable trap. Chapter 301 Saved the both of them before. Chapter 301 Saved the both of them before. Then, I want to kill you now. What do you want? The emperor's question was like a sword with a sharp edge that stabbed forth, sealing all of Su Zimo's retreat paths. His killing intent was almost tangible at this point. Shrouded by that killing intent, Su Zimo could not move at all. The Rain Admiration Pavilion fell into an eerie, terrifying silence. Even Bai Yuhan, who was standing at the side, felt a sense of trepidation, let alone Su Zimo, who was at the vortex of the storm. The Emperor's cultivation was unfathomable to begin with. Coupled with the unique aura possessed by the Emperor, this was a sort of pressure that ordinary people would not be able to endure. Even if it was a golden core in place of Su Zimo, he would be kneeling with a frightfully pale expression. However, Su Zimo stood upright, neither servile nor overbearing, with a straight back. "You want to kill me?" Su Zimo finally spoke and paused for a moment. Everyone's hearts skipped a beat. Ji Yaoxue could vaguely sense something and was so anxious that she was about to cry. Raising his head, Su Zimo had a deep gaze that shone with a demonic glint as he stared back and said slowly, "You want to kill me, so first, I'll kill." "Hey! What are you guys doing?" Before Su Zimo could say you, a gentle and soft voice rang from outside the Rain Admiration Pavilion. It was soothing and interrupted Su Zimo's sentence. His heart skipped a beat. That was a familiar voice. Everyone glanced in the direction of the voice. A young girl in a light pink dress stood with her head tilted to the side. She had an innocent look on her face as she looked into the Rain Admiration Pavilion with a curious and pure expression. The moment he saw that girl, the killing intent within the Emperor's eyes vanished instantly. While he was still suppressing Su Zimo with his aura, his gaze had turned extremely tender, as though he was worried he might scare the girl. "Yang, why are you here?" The Emperor's tone sounded reproachful and doting. The girl in pink wheedled, "I heard that sister has returned. I missed her, so I came back to take a look too." "Hey, sister, why are you standing there motionlessly and crying?" When the girl in pink walked into the Rain Admiration Pavilion, she asked with raised brows, looking confused and innocent at the sight of Ji Yaoxue weeping at the side. The Emperor released an invisible force from between his brows inconspicuously, removing the restraints on Ji Yaoxue. He said in a deep voice, "Shui, leave this place first along with Yang." "I'm not leaving." Ji Yaoxue looked at the Emperor with teary eyes and shook her head resolutely. "Ah." Right then, the girl in pink suddenly exclaimed and covered her cherry lips. She looked at Su Zimo with an incredulous expression while her eyes were filled with surprise. Young Master Su, is that you?" The girl in pink ran to Su Zimo's side excitedly and clutched his arm with a death grip, refusing to let go as though she was afraid he might disappear the next moment. Everyone was stunned. Apart from Su Zimo, everyone else in the Rain Admiration Pavilion gaped at the scene in astonishment. The Emperor was stunned as well, subconsciously removing the pressure he was applying on Su Zimo, afraid that the girl in pink might be accidentally injured. Su Zimo was rather calm. The moment she entered, he had already recognized her. This was the fiend heir of the Pure Maiden sect, Demonis G. However, she looked angelic and innocent right now. With a charming and ignorant gaze, she was like a naive and ignorant girl. If not for the fact that they were identical in appearance, Su Zimo would not have dared to confirm it. However, he recalled that Demonis G indeed had such capabilities. Be it innocent, charming, elegant, or pitiful, she was able to portray all of those images without any flaws. It was as though split personalities were hidden in Demonis G's body and could be switched at will. Su Zimo did not reply as he did not know what Demonis G was up to. "Young Master Su, I've been looking for you for so long. To think that you would be here." Demonis G clutched at the hem of Su Zimo's robes and pouted her lips in an aggrieved manner. "Yang, you." Pausing for a moment, the Emperor pointed at Su Zimo with an odd expression. "You know that person?" "No." Demonis G shook her head. "I only know that his surname is Su, but I don't know what his name is. However, young Master Su saved my life before." "Ah!" The Emperor opened his mouth slightly, dumbfounded. His expression froze and his mind was in a mess. The Imperial Army soldiers at the side, Bald Vulture, Bai Yuhan, and everyone else were losing their composure, watching with widened eyes and jaws that nearly dropped to the ground. What was up with this Su Zimo? The Emperor only had 2 daughters and he saved both of their lives before. Was this person born to save princesses? Ji Yaoxue was also slightly dazed as she blinked her watery eyes and looked on. Su Zimo had even saved her younger sister as well. The Emperor coughed gently and regained his composure, asking with a frown, "Yang, what's going on? When did he save you?" Back in Chiyu City, Demonis G replied, 3 years ago, I went to Chiyu City with Auntie Gu. I sneaked out once while Auntie Gu wasn't around, but I ended up coming across 6 bad guys. If not for young Master Su's appearance, I would have been doomed. With that said, Demonis G puffed out a breath of air and stuck out her tongue, as though she was still experiencing lingering fears. Her words were indeterminable. If Su Zimo had not experienced it himself, he would not have doubted her. Furthermore, judging from the Emperor and Ji Yaoshua's expressions, Su Zimo realized that neither of them knew what sect Demonis G was from. Silly child. The Emperor shook his head helplessly. Demonis G continued, later on, I pressed young Master Su for his residence and background so that father could reward him immensely. However, young Master Su left right away and I couldn't find him even after a long search. Ah, I got it. Demonis G revealed a look of realization as she clapped her hands together and smiled. Father, did you find young Master Su to reward him after knowing about this matter? The Emperor remained silent and smiled bitterly in his heart. No matter if Su Zimo had deceived him or killed a soldier of the Imperial Army, this was someone who had saved 2 of his daughters after all. Initially, the Emperor's attitude towards killing Su Zimo was complicated to begin with and he didn't have a strong determination to kill the latter. Now that this happened, the Emperor had completely given up on killing Su Zimo. However, he was worried about something else. Circling his gaze between his 2 daughters and Su Zimo, the Emperor sighed softly to himself. He pondered for a while before saying in a deep voice, Yanga, I have something else to discuss with Su Zimo. It's been a long time since you've met your sister. You 2 can leave first. But, what about him? I'm finally able to meet young Master Su and I'm not going to let him get away again. Demonis G pouted and hugged Su Zimo's arm tightly. 2 soft mounds pressed against Su Zimo's arm, slightly warm and extremely bouncy. He stiffened instantly. The Emperor said in an exasperated manner, Don't worry, I'll let him go after saying a few words to him. Thank you, Father. Demonis G smiled sweetly and walked to the side with a gentle voice. Tugging Ji Yaoshua by the palm, she chuckled. Let's go, sister. We'll wait outside. Yes. Ji Yaoshua nodded. Since the Emperor was willing to say that, Su Zimo's life was naturally not in danger. As such, Ji Yaoshua could finally feel relieved. The 2 sisters left the Rain Admiration Pavilion hand in hand. Chapter 302, Can't Lie. Chapter 302, Can't Lie. All of you can leave as well. After the 2 sisters left the Rain Admiration Pavilion, the Emperor waved his hand. Bald Vulture, Bai Yuhan, and the remaining Imperial Army soldiers bowed and left, leaving only the Emperor and Su Zimo in the pavilion. Didn't you have no spirit root and was unable to cultivate? I had some opportunities and unexpected circumstances. Who imparted your abilities to you? I'm a disciple of Ethereal Peak. Ethereal Peak. Good, how rare. The Emperor nodded. While Ethereal Peak was one of the 5 major sects, they had produced almost 0 powerhouses in terms of weapon refinement. If Su Zimo had not admitted it personally, the Emperor would not have guessed that the current number 1 weapon refinement master in the entire Great Zhou dynasty came from Ethereal Peak. Su Zimo, Mo Ling Fufu. The Emperor laughed and said in a self-deprecating manner, to think that someone whom I thought to be useless was actually creating waves and grand achievements right under my nose. To be fair, although Su Zimo's reputation in the capital today was in part due to his own capabilities in weapon refinement, more than half of the credit belonged to the Emperor as well. Su Zimo had truly turned famous only after the Emperor's notice. At that moment, Mo Spirit Weapon Workshop had trampled True Fire Weapon Workshop beneath its foot entirely. Furthermore, all the cultivators in the capital knew that Mo Spirit Weapon Workshop was backed by the Emperor of Great Zhou. Anyone who dared lay a finger on Mo Ling was challenging the Emperor's authority. Thereafter, it was also thanks to the Emperor's protection that Su Zimo was able to walk out safe and sound despite killing someone on the streets. That was the reason why the Emperor harbored killing intents towards Su Zimo. Other than the anger he felt due to the embarrassment of finding out the truth, it was also because he felt that he was deceived and made use of. As the Emperor, The immensity of his wrath could be imagined when he discovered that he was being toyed with by someone he thought of as a useless person. Nevertheless, Suzimo had saved his 2 daughters before. The emperor's killing intent dissipated gradually, and instead, he felt a sense of lament in his heart. The fact that a young man in his 20s could be so composed in the face of such pressure, and even muster a slight intent to retaliate, was indeed rare. Apart from his initial prejudice, the emperor admired Suzimo. However, the emperor had his worries about that admiration towards Suzimo. On the one hand, he was worried whether Suzimo had motives for getting too close with the 2 princesses. On the other hand, he could tell that both Yang and Shui had feelings for Suzimo judging from their expressions. How should he make a choice? There's no way he could let this lad take the both of them as his Dao companions. How could he enjoy such a privilege? The emperor asked, "What happened back in Chiyu City? Who were the 6 people who attacked Yang?" "I don't know." Suzimo shook his head. "I came across it unintentionally and rescued Demo. Miss G back then." Since Demonis G chose to hide the truth, there was naturally no way Suzimo was going to reveal it. Nodding his head, the emperor asked in a seemingly casual manner, "There are no outsiders here. Tell me, what do you feel about Shui and Yang?" Suzimo replied, "The 3rd princess helped both me and the Su family, so I view her as both a benefactor and a bosom friend. As for the little princess, I'm not close with her either. We merely met by chance." He took one of them as his bosom friend and was unfamiliar with the other. The emperor could sense that Suzimo was indeed telling the truth. In other words, both his initial considerations were no longer existent. However, Suzimo's attitude caused the emperor to feel somewhat indignant. His daughters were both gorgeous and elegant. There was no way they were incompatible to Suzimo, and yet he had no stray feelings towards either of them. "If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave, Your Majesty." Suzimo cupped his fists. The emperor pondered for a brief moment before saying slowly, "Nothing is changed regarding the sect competition where I've invited you to be the judge for the weapon refinement segment." That sentence meant that the emperor no longer had any prejudice towards Suzimo and had acknowledged all of the latter's achievement. Suzimo nodded before bidding farewell. Gazing at Suzimo's disappearing back view, the emperor smiled gently and lamented, "It's fortuitous that Ethereal Peak produced someone like that to reclaim a position in terms of weapon refinement. Otherwise, they're definitely going to be disgraced at the sect competition." He paused for a moment before shaking his head and muttering to himself, "However, other than weapon refinement, Ethereal Peak has no means of achieving anything for the other 3 ranking lists." "Yang, what happened in Chiyu City? Share with me how Zimo managed to save your life." Ji Yaoshue asked curiously outside the Rain Admiration Pavilion. Demonis Ji blinked and surveyed her surroundings before tugging Ji Yaoshue's hand and tugging the latter to a corner. She made sure that no one was around before whispering, "Sister, I made that up. I don't know that young Master Su at all." "Huh?" Ji Yaoshue was stunned. Demonis Ji covered her mouth and chuckled. "I merely came over to help you because I heard that father was enraged. Hihi, to think that father couldn't tell at all. You." Ji Yaoshue tapped Demonis Ji's fair and delicate forehead before laughing in an exasperated manner. "Father was not the only one. I bought your story too." Pausing for a moment, Ji Yaoshue retracted her smile and sighed softly. "However, if you hadn't appeared, Zimo truly might not have survived." "That Su Zimo, he's the one you fancy?" Demonis Ji blinked her eyes and asked. Ji Yaoshue blushed slightly and chided softly, "Go away, don't spout nonsense." "Hihi, it must be. You're asking for a beating, young lady." Just as the two of them were bickering, Su Zimo had already exited the Rain Admiration Pavilion and was heading in their direction. When he approached, he cupped his fists. "Thank you, princesses." "Hey, young Master Su. I'm called Ji Yaoyang. Remember that I've done you a favor and you must thank me if there's a chance." After saying that, Demonis Ji gave Su Zimo an alluring smile and winked while Ji Yaoshue was not noticing. Her smile was as beautiful as a flower and could turn the world upside down. Her eyes resembled water, as though they could draw one's soul into them. Su Zimo closed his eyes hurriedly and took a deep breath of cold air as a burning sensation spread within him. That was the fiend heir of the Pure Maiden sect, he remembered. Ji Yaoshue was a little surprised and turned to look at Su Zimo before glancing at Demonis Ji. By now, Demonis Ji had already returned to normal, and that bewitching smile and seductive gaze disappeared in a flash as though everything was an illusion. Demonis Ji waved and bid goodbye. Gazing at Demonis Ji's back view, Ji Yaoshue said to Su Zimo, "You've really got to thank Yanga. She did not know you at all and specially made up a lie to deceive father. Yanga isn't experienced in the world and she's pure and kind. Someone like her doesn't know how to lie at all. It was really hard on her this time round." Ji Yaoshue sighed gently once more. Su Zimo was speechless as he thought to himself, if that younger sister of yours doesn't know how to lie and is pure and kind, there would be no honest soul remaining on the face of this world. However, Su Zimo could not speak his mind. After all, he had promised Demonis Ji that he would help her conceal her identity. Furthermore, judging from the attitudes of Ji Yaoshue and the Emperor, even if Su Zimo were to tell them that Demonis Ji was the fiend heir of the Pure Maiden sect, neither of them would buy the truth at all. "What does your sister usually do?" Su Zimo asked in a seemingly casual manner. Ji Yaoyang shook her head. "Yanga can't cultivate and has been learning how to do business from Auntie Ji Yu. She's just all around the place." Demonis Ji had cultivated some sort of a technique that could conceal her cultivation realm completely, making her look like a mortal. However, there was indeed no need for her to dirty her hands personally if she wanted to kill anyone. She was always making use of others to do it for her. A single gaze of hers would suffice. Chapter 303 Sect Competition. Chapter 303 Sect Competition. The capital of Great Ju was getting livelier. Most of the sects within the Great Ju Dominion had arrived by the final few days. Under the lead of Array Peak's master, Xian Yi, and Talisman Peak's master, Liu Hui, the group from Ethereal Peak arrived in the capital as well. Apart from the two golden cores, Ethereal Peak only had less than 10 disciples. Look, they seem to be the disciples from Ethereal Peak. To think that there would be so few of them. It's good enough that they're even able to come here. I heard that Ethereal Peak suffered a huge blow after the battle at Dongling Valley and almost all of their Foundation Establishment Realm disciples are dead. Yes, I reckon they're just here to join the fun. There's almost nothing Ethereal Peak can do for the 4 ranking roles. Xian Yi and Liu Hui were expressionless as they walked through the streets and could vaguely hear the discussions around them. However, the disciples behind them let out indignant expressions. They're really spouting nonsense. Senior Brother Ji is at 5 Meridian Foundation Establishment and he'll definitely be able to get a spot on the spirit ranking. The person who spoke was round like a ball. It was none other than Little Fatty of Ethereal Peak. The Senior Brother Ji that Little Fatty was referring to wore grey robes and he had slender limbs. He was Ji Chengtian. Ji Chengtian was already one of Ethereal Peak's 3 great legacy disciples to begin with. At the same time, he was the only legacy disciple that survived the battle at Dongling Valley. 3 years ago, Ji Chengtian was only at 4 Meridian Foundation Establishment. Now, his cultivation realm was at 5 Meridian Foundation Establishment and he was the strongest of the inner sect disciples. When Ji Chengtian heard Little Fatty's words, he let out a bitter smile and his gaze darkened. Qin Yu, who was initially lauded as the number 1 of the inner sect disciples and had hopes of breaking through to 6 Meridian Foundation Establishment before the sect competition, had died at Dongling Valley. Right now, apart from him, the strongest in Ethereal Peak was only at 3 Meridian Foundation Establishment. The sect did not even have any disciples at 3 Meridian Foundation Establishment. In other words, there was little hope for everyone else apart from him to vie for a spot on the spirit ranking of the sect competition. Ethereal Peak still had some hope for the talisman ranking. Lung Ru had a deep attainment in terms of talisman crafting and she was best among all the inner sect disciples. As for elixir and weapon refinement, even though the sect had sent a disciple in each segment over, they were merely taking part and had no chance of retaining a position on the elixir and weapon rankings. Shuiyi said softly, "Actually, if Junior Brother Su was still alive, I'm sure he'll be able to retain a position on the weapon ranking given his capabilities." When they heard the words Junior Brother Su, everyone from Ethereal Peak fell silent and sighed. The two golden cores, Xian Yi and Liu Hui, shook their heads and let out regretful expressions as well. Ji Chengtian and the others had the most complicated feelings towards Su Zimo. In that battle 3 years ago, Su Zimo had slain the young master of the Blood Crow Palace and sacrificed himself to lure more than half of the opposing cultivators away. By doing so, he caused huge chaos in the ranks of their opponents. If not for that fact, all of them would have perished in Dongling Valley. Lung Ru lowered her head and her gaze was cold. However, there was a flash of sadness in her eyes. "Get your spirits up." Xian Yi hollered, "Shui Yi, part of the reason why you're here is to take part in the sect competition. But more importantly, it's for you to witness the magnificence of the #1 weapon refinement master of the Great Zhu dynasty." "That's right." Talisman Peak's master, Liu Hui, nodded. "It's said that Mr. Mo will appear during the sect competition as one of the judges for the weapon refinement segment. If you can obtain a couple of insights through Mr. Mo's opinions, you might be able to save yourself 10 years of hard work." "Yes." Shui Yi nodded heavily. Many weapon refinement masters within the Great Zhu Dominion idolized Mo Ling almost blindly, and it was the same for Shui Yi as well. In his opinion, Mo Ling's rise to prominence was like a miracle that left everyone in awe. Throughout history, there had never been a weapon refinement master who could customize supreme-grade spirit weapons like Mo Ling. Every single weapon refinement master wanted to see for themselves what the legendary Mo clan's spirit gathering technique was like. This day, the capital was already bustling with people by the time the sun rose. There were more than 1,000 sects together, let alone the number of disciples each sect had. At a glance, it was packed with people as the crowd snaked through the streets and alleys, rushing towards the southwest corner of the capital. Today was the day of the sect competition. All eyes were on him. Every sect competition would always be held at the southwest corner of the capital, where there was a large and spacious venue that could accommodate hundreds of thousands of people with ease. The Scarlet Vulture, Azure Falcon, and White Hawk guards were all mobilized, all of them riding their spirit beasts as they circled the skies, maintaining order on the streets. Apart from some itinerant cultivators, most of the sects had golden cores leading the teams. There was a sunken area in the middle of the square where the cultivators taking part in the sect competition would refine weapons and elixirs or create talismans to decide the eventual victors. There were 4 huge jade pillars erected in the 4 corners of the sunken area. White as ivory, they shone with a mysterious luster. Those 4 jade pillars represented the 4 ranking lists for spirit, talisman, elixir, and weapon of the sect competition. Each jade pillar had 10 slots for names. In other words, after the sect competition ended, the 40 names shown on those 4 jade pillars would be the eventual victors of the sect competition. The sunken area was squarish with 4 faces, 3 of which were spectator zones provided for the foundation establishment cultivators of the various sects to watch the sect competition. The final area had a golden carpet paving the ground, and it ascended upwards with 999 steps towards an exquisitely supreme throne right at the top. That was the seat of the Emperor of Great Zhu. On both sides of the golden carpet, there were several rows of seats and tables. They were filled with spirit fruits, immortal peaches, and jade liquid, giving off a fragrant scent. Those seats were prepared for the golden cores of the various sects. As golden cores, there was naturally no way they could squeeze together and watch the sunken area like the rest of the foundation establishment cultivators. Naturally, the proximity towards the seat of the emperor was indication of a golden core's fame, strength, and background. The seats at the furthest ends were filled mostly with itinerant cultivators. While they were also golden cores, they were weaker and were purely there to join in the fun and expand their horizons. The commanders of the 3 city guard squads, Bald Vulture, the Bearded Man, and Bai Yuhan, guarded the edge of the golden carpet. All golden cores who wanted to get a seat had to go through the 3 of them. The 3 of them would size the golden cores before making the appropriate arrangements. The group from Ethereal Peak arrived at the sunken area. Turning around, Xian Yi said in a low voice, "Don't feel pressured for this sect competition. Just do your best." "Understood." Little Fatty and the others responded. Even though they replied readily, every single disciple of Ethereal Peak looked slightly nervous. The scene before them was way too grand, and the number of cultivators surrounding the sunken area increased as more streamed in constantly. Xian Yi and Liu Hui exchanged glances. Both could tell of the helplessness and worry in the other's eyes. Before the battle even began, the disciples were already showing fear. They were without a leader. The battle at Dongling Valley had dealt way too much damage to Ethereal Peak. While they had a 5-meridian foundation establishment cultivator like Ji Chengtian, he lacked sturdiness and dominance. He did not possess the type of fearless confidence that could always push forth. If he was alive, perhaps, things would be different. Scenes flashed through Xian Yi's mind. It was a green-robed cultivator with exquisite features. Although he was young, he always maintained his composure, the number one of 4 peaks who could refine elixirs, weapons, clear the 10 formations pagoda and defeat all his foes. Chapter 304 Who said that there is no one from Ethereal Peak that can refine weapons? Chapter 304 Who said that there is no one from Ethereal Peak that can refine weapons? The spectator area on both sides of the golden carpet were already starting to fill with golden cores. After giving a couple more reminders, Xian Yi and Liu Hui crossed the sunken area and headed for the spectator area as well. When they arrived, Xian Yi and Liu Hui handed their respective sect badges to the bearded man and Bai Yuhan. This was not Xian Yi's first sect competition, and he already knew the 3 commanders. However, he still had to go through a symbolic check. The bearded man smiled and asked, "Fellow Daoist, when Xian didn't come this time round?" When he heard that, Xian Yi's expression dimmed as he shook his head gently. There was sadness and anger in Liu Hui's eyes as well. The bearded man pondered for a moment and vaguely guessed what happened. It was said that Ethereal Peak suffered heavy casualties for the battle at Dongling Valley, and several golden cores had perished as well. Only one of them managed to survive. Judging from Xian Yi and Liu Hui's expressions, when Xian was most likely dead. Xian Yi forced out a smile. 3 years ago, Ethereal Peak was attacked and many of our disciples were injured or killed. This time round, we only brought a couple of them over so that they can broaden their horizons. As for the 4 ranking lists, we don't harbor any hope of taking any positions. The bearded man shook his head and replied hurriedly, "You're being humble, fellow Daoist. Who would dare look down on any disciple of Ethereal Peak? Even if it's just one person, he's enough to crush all the other prodigies." "That's right." Bai Yuhan smiled as well. "Congratulations. Ethereal Peak's about to become famous again." "Ah!" Both Xian Yi and Liu Hui were stunned for a moment. The 2 of them immediately thought that the bearded man and Bai Yuhan were being sarcastic and mocking Ethereal Peak. In the previous sect competitions, Ethereal Peak would occupy at least 3 of the 10 spots on the spirit ranking alone. At its prime, Ethereal Peak could even occupy half of the rankings. However, for this sect competition, Ethereal Peak could only obtain 2 of the 40 spots on the 4 ranking lists at the very most. It would already be fortuitous if they did not embarrass the sect, let alone make it famous. Liu Hui harumphed coldly in displeasure. Xian Yi frowned, feeling perplexed. He looked at the gaze and expressions of the bearded man and Bai Yuhan. Neither of them seemed like they were being sarcastic. They sounded sincere, as though they were implying something else. "This way, please." The bearded man nodded with a smile as he added. Because there were other golden cores lining up behind them, it was inappropriate for Xian Yi to linger further, and he could only enter the spectator area with his doubts. "Look, the Peak Masters have already sat down." Beside the sunken area, Little Fatty pointed at the spectator seats a distance away and said, "The seats of the 2 Peak Masters are rather decent. They're quite close to the Emperor's throne." The spectator seats could roughly be divided into several major areas. The first area only had a single seat, the Emperor's throne. Beneath the Emperor's throne, there were not many seats in the second area. Till now, they were empty without a single person. The third area was where Xian Yi and Liu Hui were seated. Apart from the 2 of them, the golden cores from the other 4 major sects, Iridescent Clouds Palace, True Fire Sect, Southern Mountains Sect and Azure Frost Sect were also seated. Following that was the 4th area where golden cores of the other sects within the Great Dew Dominion were seated. This was the largest area with the most seats. The fifth area comprised of itinerant cultivators at Golden Core Realm. How ignorant! Even if your golden cores of Ethereal Peak are seated in the third area, what can that prove? Right then, a sneer sounded from the side in a mocking manner. Another sarcastic voice rang out. In my opinion, Ethereal Peak's most likely going to be removed from the 5 major sects after this sect competition. Little Fatty and the others frowned and turned to their sides. The 2 people who spoke were disciples of True Fire Sect. Also, as one of the 5 major sects, True Fire Sect sent more than 100 Foundation Establishment cultivators. Of the 2 leaders, one of the men had a sharp face and high nose bridge. His lips were thin and he exuded a sinisterly ruthless aura. The other man wore maroon robes and had a haughty expression. Whether or not we're removed is not decided by True Fire Sect. Just mind your own business. Shui Yi was upset and retorted. The maroon-robed man turned around and sized Shui Yi up before asking with a smirk, "Fellow Daoist, you seem to be indignant. You're only at mid-stage Foundation Establishment, so I reckon you must be here for the talisman, elixir, or weapon ranking lists. But, the elixir and weapon refinement masters of Ethereal Peak, haha, I can't comment much about you guys." Upon hearing that, everyone burst into laughter. In previous sect competitions, Ethereal Peak disciples had never gotten a spot on the elixir and weapon ranking lists. To everyone else, elixir and weapon refinement masters from Ethereal Peak were nothing but a joke. Upon hearing the mocking laughter, everyone from Ethereal Peak looked terrible. The maroon-robed man continued asking with a smile, "So, you're a talisman master?" "No." Shui Yi declared loudly, "I'm not afraid of letting you guys know either that I'm a weapon refinement master and I'm here for the weapon refinement segment." "Oh, hey." The maroon-robed man dragged his voice and let out an enlightened expression before giving a fake smirk. "So, you're a weapon refinement master. A weapon refinement master of Ethereal Peak to boot. I've been impolite, please excuse me." Everyone could hear the mocking tone of the maroon-robed man. He continued, "What a coincidence. I'm Dao Feng, also a weapon refinement master." "So, he's Dao Feng. Who is Dao Feng?" "The #1 weapon refinement master of True Fire Sect. Even though he's only 30 years old, he has already managed to refine a superior grade spirit weapon successfully and is an advanced weapon refinement master. The rumors out there are saying that fellow Daoist Dao Feng is the #1 weapon refinement master of the younger generation." Dao Feng could feel the envious gazes of the surrounding cultivators as he listened on to the discussions. Brimming with pride, he raised his chin slightly and looked at Shui Yi in a smug, taunting manner. "How do I address you, fellow Daoist? I wonder what grade of spirit weapon you're able to refine?" Shui Yi blushed and did not say anything. With his capabilities, he could only refine inferior-grade spirit weapons. Since he could not even refine middle-grade spirit weapons, he was naturally inferior and could not compare to Dao Feng who was before him. Dao Feng raised his brow and scoffed. "Oh, so you're a nobody. You." Shui Yi glared at him. "What's there to be cocky about?" Little Fatty pouted. "Mr. Mo, the #1 weapon refinement master of Great Jew is 100,000 times better than you. If you've really got what it takes, go compete with him." Dao Feng declared proudly, "Rumor has it that Mr. Mo is a golden core, so he must have lived for a few hundreds of years. I dare to say that when he was at my age, Mr. Mo was definitely not at my level." None of the cultivators present had the right to refute. Additionally, Dao Feng looked at Shui Yi and scoffed coldly. "Are you even qualified to call yourself a weapon refinement master? Let me advise you, from now on, don't make a fool of yourself by coming forth like this anymore. Scram home and stay right there. Fuck." Little Fatty's blood surged and he was about to lash out. "Junior brother." At the side, Ji Chengtian frowned and held back the enraged Little Fatty before shaking his head. "Forget it, let's not argue with them. Let's sigh." When they heard Ji Chengtian's sigh, everyone from Ethereal Peak went silent as a sense of helplessness surged through them. No matter what, the current Ethereal Peak was indeed inferior to others. When he saw that, Dao Feng was even more smug as he burst out laughing. There's no one in Ethereal Peak that can refine weapons such that any Tom, Dick and Harry could call themselves weapon refinement masters. What a joke. Ha ha ha. Who said that there is no one from Ethereal Peak that can refine weapons? Right then, another voice rang out from the crowd, even revealing a trace of killing intent. Chapter 305, You're Not Qualified. Chapter 305, You're Not Qualified. Many cultivators turned in the direction of the voice with curious expressions. Upon hearing that voice, Little Fatty, Leng Ru and Shui Yi froze for a moment as confusion flashed across their eyes. After a brief pause, Little Fatty widened his eyes and exclaimed softly, "It's bro." Leng Ru's expression changed as waves stirred in her eyes. There could only be one person that Little Fatty referred to as bro, Su Zimo. She could naturally tell that the person's voice was extremely similar to Su Zimo's. However, it was impossible. Su Zimo was clearly already. With a trace of anticipation and uneasiness, everyone from Ethereal Peak turned around. Not far away, a green-robed cultivator walked over from the crowd with Ethereal Peak's sect badge hanging at his waist. He had delicate features and exuded an elegant aura, making him look like a frail scholar. However, for some reason, as he walked through the massive crowd, the surrounding cultivators gave way to him subconsciously. It was as though there was an invisible field of pressure surrounding the green-robed cultivator. After he walked over, everyone regained their senses with lost expressions, wondering why they gave way to him in the first place. Ah! At that moment, Leng Ru's cold demeanor underwent a drastic change as she exclaimed and covered her mouth. Ji Chengtian was stunned and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Junior brother Su. Why you alive? Shui Yi's voice was trembling with excitement. Little Fatty pushed through the crowd and rushed in front of Su Zimo in the blink of an eye. He pounded on Su Zimo's chest, which gave off a resounding echo before grinning foolishly. It's real, it's real. Ha, ha ha ha. Su Zimo smiled gently and his gaze swept past Leng Ru, Shui Yi, Ji Chengtian, and the others before nodding his head. Even though he had asked about the outcome of the battle at Dongling Valley, Su Zimo felt a sense of sadness when he saw the small number of people arriving from the sect. This should not have been the case. Ethereal Peak should have had more than 100 elite Foundation establishment cultivators and a majestic form. Even disciples of True Fire sect should not have dared to speak so rudely to disciples of Ethereal Peak. But now, everyone from Ethereal Peak could only lower their heads in helplessness and choose to retreat against the provocations from disciples of True Fire sect. Su Zimo was enraged, but his expression turned colder. Bro, where have you been for the past 3 years? Why haven't there been any news of you at all? How did you manage to survive back then? Little Fatty had countless doubts and was waiting for Su Zimo to resolve them. It's a long story. I'll tell you in the future if there's a chance. Sweeping his gaze across the many disciples of True Fire sect, Su Zimo asked in a cold manner, who was the one who said that there is no one from Ethereal Peak who can refine weapons? I did. Dao Feng sized up Su Zimo, twisted his neck and scoffed. Why? Are you unhappy? You even said that the weapon refinement masters of Ethereal Peak are jokes. Su Zimo did not answer and continued asking. That's right, I said that. Dao Feng laughed. Also, I'm telling you that it is the truth. If you're unhappy, it's easy to settle things. Just come and compete against me, junior brother Su, compete against him. We believe in you. Shui Yi clenched his fists. Even though Shui Yi had not seen Su Zimo for 3 years, he believed that the latter's skill in weapon refinement was still stronger than his. In fact, Su Zimo might even be able to refine middle-grade spirit weapons by now. Do you dare to compete, huh? Dao Feng glared at Su Zimo in a provocative manner. Su Zimo did not even look back and remarked indifferently, "You're not qualified to compete with me." The crowd quietened down instantly. In an instant, it became even noisier. Haha. This kid is really funny. He's the first one who dares to say that Dao Feng isn't qualified. Who is this guy? He really doesn't know his place. He should be inexperienced and ignorant. To think that he would dare spout of such nonsense without even knowing who Dao Feng is really an embarrassment to Ethereal Peak. Laughter erupted from the crowd and many cultivators pointed and gossiped about Su Zimo. Dao Feng was very pleased as he smiled at Su Zimo smugly, as though he was looking at a joke. Su Zimo. Suddenly, a girl's voice that carried some doubt in it came from the other side of the crowd. Su Zimo turned around and their eyes met. There was a slight pause before the two of them peeled their gazes away and returned to normal. It was Shun Mengqi. The crowd at that side was filled with disciples from Iridescent Cloud's palace, and Shun Mengqi was amongst them. Ever since they parted ways in the capital of Yang country, Su Zimo no longer felt any stirs in his heart now that he was seeing Shun Mengqi again. She came to Su Zimo's side and frowned. "It's indeed you. Even after 3 years, you're still so arrogant. Do you know who he is?" Shun Mengqi pointed at Dao Feng and questioned Su Zimo. Su Zimo shook his head. "I don't." With a tinge of reprimand in her tone, Shun Mengqi said in a deep voice, "His Dao Feng, a weapon refinement master of True Fire Sect. True Fire Sect is renowned for their ability to control flames, and they will occupy at least 3 spots on the elixir and weapon rankings each time. As for Ethereal Peak, you guys can't even get a single spot. How can you compete with him in terms of weapon refinement?" "I'm not intending to compete with him. Like I said, he's not qualified." Su Zimo's tone was still as calm and natural, as though he was stating a fact. However, Su Zimo's words only attracted even more ridicule. Shun Mengqi laughed out of anger. Fellow Daoist Dao Feng is lauded as the #1 weapon refinement master of the younger generation. Saying that he's not qualified only exemplifies your ignorance and arrogance. Indeed, truly ignorant. Su Zimo nodded with a mocking look in his eyes. "I believe in junior brother Su." Right then, Leng Ru spoke all of a sudden. Even though her tone was cold, it was extremely firm. "If he says that Dao Feng isn't qualified, Dao Feng definitely isn't qualified." When he heard that, Su Zimo smiled faintly at Leng Ru and nodded his head. Shun Mengqi felt inexplicably vexed when she saw that. "Fellow Daoist, I can understand how you want to support your fellow sect mate. However, you can't do it blindly or it'll only bring shame to Ethereal Peak." Shun Mengqi glared at Leng Ru and sneered, "Let me tell you, there's only one person in the capital of Great Ju who can say that Dao Feng is not qualified. That is none other than the #1 weapon refinement master of the Great Ju dynasty, Mr. Mo Ling." The crowd fell silent upon hearing the words Mr. Mo. That name indeed carried a strange magic to it. Dao Feng nodded as well. "If Mr. Mo is here, I'm willing to listen to his teachings." He paused for a moment before glancing askance at Su Zimo. "But, who do you think you are?" When Shun Mengqi saw how indifferent Su Zimo was towards the words Mr. Mo, she could not help but shake her head and sigh gently. "Seems like you've never even heard of Mr. Mo before." Her sigh revealed a sense of superiority, as though it was an honor worth bragging about to know of Mr. Mo. Chapter 306, Gathering. Chapter 306, Gathering. Su Zimo turned and asked with a fake smile, "Are you very close to Mr. Mo?" "I." Shun Mengqi was stunned by his question and looked flustered. As a Foundation establishment cultivator, how would she have the chance to know Mr. Mo? Su Zimo smiled. "Seems like you're not close to him. In that case, have you met him before?" Su Zimo's gaze seemed to have a deeper meaning and it made Shun Mengqi feel inexplicably frustrated. Composing herself, Shun Mengqi raised her chin and replied smugly, "I've never met Mr. Mo before, but I took part in his auction once. Without experiencing and seeing it for yourself, it's impossible for you to imagine how much influence a weapon refinement master can possess." Su Zimo remained silent as he looked at Shun Mengqi with a faint smile on his face. "You don't have to look at me like that." Shun Mengqi harumphed. "Who do you think Mr. Mo is? It's only normal that I haven't seen him before. Even among the thousands of golden cores sitting at the spectator area, few of them have seen the true face of Mr. Mo." Smiling, Su Zimo looked at Shun Mengqi quietly. "What exactly are you trying to say?" I just want to tell you that even though you're here to take part in the sect competition, it doesn't mean anything." Shinmengqi clutched her fists tightly. "You're still as brazen, arrogant and ignorant as ever. You haven't even heard of Mr. Mo before. I advise you to not compete later on lest you embarrass yourself." There was something else that Shinmengqi did not say. "Suzimo, even though you've entered the cultivation world and are here at the sect competition as well, you'll never be able to beat me." Shinmengqi only wanted to prove one thing. That one single thing that she had never been able to let go for the past few years. That year, that day, in that small town, she did not make the wrong choice. "Your master is here too, right?" Suddenly, Suzimo asked. "What do you want?" Suddenly, Shinmengqi became nervous and frowned. "Suzimo, I advise you to calm down. Do you have a death wish? My master was truly angered over what happened 3 years ago. 3 years ago, in the capital of Yang country, Suzimo severely injured a group of disciples from Iridescent Cloud's palace and even killed one of them. That matter naturally could not be hidden from perfected being Kang Lang." Suzimo smiled and said slowly, "I heard that your master, perfected being Kang Lang, is on good terms with Mr. Mo. In fact, Mr. Mo is even willing to customize a supreme-grade spirit weapon for him for free on just a single condition." Shinmengqi's expression changed. That incident was an absolute humiliation for perfected being Kang Lang and had spread through the entire capital in less than a day. No one in Iridescent Cloud's palace dared to discuss that matter. With a profound gaze, Suzimo said meaningfully, "Shinmengqi, have you ever thought about why Mr. Mo would propose that condition?" Almost everyone knew that the condition was for perfected being Kang Lang to kneel down. At that moment, Shinmengqi seemed to have thought of something. Just as she was in deep thought, she heard a call by her ear, interrupting her train of thought. "Junior sister, he is Suzimo." A man wearing the robes of Iridescent Cloud's palace strode over. He was handsome and extraordinary, carrying an elegance in his graceful steps as he stared at Suzimo with a hint of killing intent. "Ah, he is," Shinmengqi replied instinctively. She had vaguely thought of an answer to Suzimo's question, but after being interrupted by senior brother Sai Yutang, she could not recall anything. "You were the one who killed one of our disciples, huh?" Sai Yutang closed in to Suzimo and asked coldly with an unfriendly expression. "That's me," Suzimo replied indifferently. "This punk is really daring to kill cultivators of Iridescent Cloud's palace. This time round, Ethereal Peak is already weak to begin with, and yet they have a disciple who has so many enemies." In an instant, he offended both True Fire Sect and Iridescent Cloud's palace. "I think Ethereal Peak is doomed." The surrounding cultivators discussed fervently at the side. Frowning, Shinmengqi dissuaded softly, "Senior brother, forget it. We're in the capital of Great Ju. Forget it. Foo-foo." Sai Yutang was unmoved and sneered coldly, "Sai Zimo, do you dare to participate in the competition for the spirit ranking?" Before Suzimo could reply, a shout from the crowd drew away everyone's attention. "Look, over there. He can actually fly in the capital. Who is he?" From the looks of it, they should be the princes. In the sky not far away, 5 men flew through the air under the escort of powerful Imperial Army Golden Corps. They were dressed in rich clothes, descending slowly onto the spectator area with a graceful bearing. Arriving beneath the Emperor's throne, the 5 of them took their seats in the second major area and nodded to their surroundings. Before long, there was another commotion among the crowd. Not too far away, 2 women appeared in midair. The woman in front had an extraordinary appearance. She had a smile on her face and body was full of curves, exuding a mature and alluring aura. The other girl wore a pink dress and had a petite yet exquisitely shaped body. The only pity was that she was wearing a veil and her face could not be seen clearly. Sai Yutang coughed gently and declared proudly, "If I'm not wrong, the person in front should be Chief Steward Ji of the Sky Treasure Auction House. Chief Steward Ji is truly a seductress." Another cultivator looked infatuated as he gulped. "Who is the girl behind her? Even though she's wearing a veil, her eyes are really pretty and seem like they can speak." As everyone discussed, the girl in pink suddenly turned around and looked towards them. Her big and clear eyes blinked before curving into a pair of crescents as she beamed widely. "Look, that girl in pink is looking at me. Don't talk nonsense." "She's definitely looking at me." The surrounding cultivators started arguing. Dao Feng of True Fire sect sneered internally, but he pretended to be calm and nodded towards the girl in pink. It was the same for Sai Yutang, who hurriedly nodded and gestured, thinking that the girl in pink had noticed him. When Su Zimo saw that, he sighed internally. Demonis Ji's methods were truly formidable. If she were to grow further in the future, she would definitely be someone who could overturn the world with her fingers. Under everyone's watchful gazes, Ji Yushi and Demonis Ji descended slowly, arriving at the second spectator area and sat down together with the Princey. Most of the cultivators were unsure who the second area was reserved for. But now, everyone was enlightened. The second area was occupied either by the royal family or the most influential cultivators in the capital. There weren't many seats in the second area, and there were only 2 remaining after Ji Yushi and Demonis Ji took their seats. "Look!" Someone in the crowd pointed into the distance and exclaimed. In the sky far away, a group of palace maids flew through the air. They wore thin veils with ribbons around their necks, looking extremely ravishing. They seemed like they were treading on the clouds as they escorted a graceful and luxurious carriage over. Within the carriage, a slender and exquisite figure sat. Her appearance was faintly indiscernible under the guise of the bead curtain. There were more than 100,000 cultivators surrounding the sunken area. At this moment, all of them watched with agape mouths and shocked expressions. Chapter 307, Very Beautiful. Chapter 307, Very Beautiful. That must be the third princess of Great Ju. I heard that the third princess entered Azure Frost sect for cultivation under the name of Yaoshue. Now that she has regained her identity, she will most probably not return to Azure Frost sect. I heard that the third princess is beautiful and ravishing. If only we could take a closer look at her. A commotion broke out among the crowd. Pondering for a moment, Dao Feng's eyes lit up in realization. So, it's fellow Daoist Yaoshue. In that case, I've met the third princess before. Amazing, Senior Brother Dao. Senior Brother Dao, is the third princess really as beautiful as the legends say? Many True Fire sect disciples beside Dao Feng revealed looks of envy as they fought to ask questions. Dao Feng was delighted. On the other side, Sai Yutang smiled leisurely and said, I was fortunate enough to have conversed with fellow Daoist Yaoshue before. Back then, I already had a feeling that she was unique and had an extraordinary aura. So, this is her true identity. It's no wonder then. Sai Yutang's sentence was extremely particular. On the one hand, he was boasting that he had once chatted with the third princess of Great Ju. On the other hand, he was subtly praising himself for his keen observation. Naturally, his words attracted flattering from a group of cultivators as well. Apart from Iridescent Cloud's Palace, Ethereal Peak and True Fire sect, there were hundreds of Foundation Establishment disciples from Azure Frost sect. When they heard the discussions over at the side of Dao Feng and Sai Yutang, many Azure Frost sect disciples scoffed coldly. One of them said, Senior Brother Jun and Senior Sister Yaoshue are close friends and yet he isn't even saying anything. Yet, you guys are bragging over seeing her or talking to her once. How laughable. Isn't that right? Only Senior Brother Jun is worthy of Senior Sister Yaoshue. The Senior Brother Jun that the Azure Frost sect disciples were mentioning was Jun Hao, the number 1 of all Foundation Establishment cultivators in Azure Frost sect. He had courted Yaoshue painstakingly for many years, but her attitude towards him had always been neutral. At that moment, Jun Hao was standing in front of the many disciples of Azure Frost sect. Hands behind his back, he looked dignified and merely smiled faintly without saying anything upon hearing the comments. As everyone discussed, the carriage that was originally headed for the spectator area suddenly paused. Changing directions, it moved towards them slowly. Could it be that the third princess is coming over? Dao Feng suddenly straightened his clothes, feeling a little nervous. Sai Yutang's heart also started thumping and his mouth was dry. A thought flashed across their minds at the same moment. Could the third princess be here to see me? The carriage in midair was clearly about to descend in front of them. Senior sister Yaoshue is coming over. Senior brother Jun, the third princess is definitely here for you. A few Azure Frost sect disciples said excitedly. Jun Hao of Azure Frost sect smiled and looked at the person inside the carriage with a gentle gaze. Splash! A white lotus-like arm reached out and lifted the bead curtain, revealing a refreshing and flawlessly beautiful face. Everyone's breathing stopped. Ji Yaoshue was wearing a faint yellow long robe. It was made of unique materials and had intricate patterns carved on it, looking extremely gorgeous as though it was created by the heavens. So beautiful! The crowd gasped. In truth, Ji Yaoshue's appearance could not be considered as peerless, nor could she match against Dai Yu. She was merely comparable to Lung Ru, and each had their own merits. However, she was the princess of Great Ju after all. The light yellow robe on her today was extraordinary and fit her perfectly, accentuating her slim and graceful figure as well as adding a layer of class and elegance. A weapon refinement master's eyes flickered as he said in a deep voice, "This robe is not simple. It seems to be an extremely high-graded defensive spirit weapon. That's the princess of the Great Ju dynasty for you. Even a single robe is a high-graded defensive spirit weapon. By the looks of it, that seems to be customized for her." Many cultivators revealed looks of envy. Some of the female cultivators were even feeling jealous, fantasizing about how the pale yellow robe would look on them instead. With light steps, Ji Yaoshue walked towards the crowd. The crowd subconsciously parted to make way for her. Jun Hao of Azure Frost sect cupped his fists and said sincerely with a smile, "Junior sister Yaoshue, it's only been a few days since we last met, but you're really becoming prettier." Jun Hao could not continue. Initially, he thought that Ji Yaoshue was here for him. However, she merely glanced at him nonchalantly and nodded her head as a form of greeting. Brushing by him, Ji Yaoshue did not say a single word at all. In fact, she did not even pause for a moment. A gust of fragrant wind blew past, leaving Jun Hao with his hands that were hovering in midair and a slightly stiff expression on his face. Dao Feng was overjoyed when he saw that. Although he was looking forward to it, Dao Feng did not bear much hope. After all, he had only met Ji Yaoshue once. But now, Ji Yaoshue did not bother about Jun Hao from Azure Frost sect and was headed in his direction. When he saw Ji Yaoshue approaching, Dao Feng coughed lightly and revealed a bright smile. "Greetings, third princess, I am Dao." Dao Feng could not continue either. Ji Yaoshue glanced at him and walked past without even nodding her head. She looked as though she was glancing at a stranger. Little Fatty seized the rare opportunity and could not help but laugh. "My, the princess doesn't even know who you are, and yet you're bragging about meeting her once." Dao Feng's expression darkened as he snorted. Sai Yutang took a deep breath of air and calmed himself down when he saw the third princess headed towards him. He took a few steps forward and bowed slightly, cupping his fists. "I am." Ji Yaoshue walked past him without even glancing once at him. Flushing red with embarrassment, Sai Yutang looked awkward and wished he could dig a hole and hide in it. "Who is the third princess looking for?" "I don't know." As Ji Yaoshue walked, the crowd dispersed to both sides and only a single person did not budge, looking extremely striking. "Su Zimo, what are you still standing there for? Make way." Shun Mengqi frowned and hollered. Su Zimo did not say anything. Scoffing coldly, Shun Mengqi continued, "Su Zimo, perhaps no one could do anything to you in the capital for offending True Fire Sect and Iridescent Cloud's palace. However, if you offend the third princess of Great Ju, no one can save you." Su Zimo remained silent. "Why are you still as stubborn as when you were young? You refuse to kneel when you're asked to, and now, you refuse to move away as well." Shun Mengqi gritted her teeth and walked towards Su Zimo, wanting to push the latter away. Right then, Ji Yaoshue had already arrived in front of Su Zimo and stopped in her tracks. Shun Mengqi was also rooted in her tracks instinctively. The originally noisy crowd quietened down. Everyone's gaze was on Ji Yaoshue while her gaze was on Su Zimo. Their eyes met. Ji Yaoshue turned her body slightly, causing her pale yellow dress to flutter slightly. She looked like a young girl in love. Blinking her bright eyes, Ji Yaoshue asked with a smile, "Zimo, how is it?" Everyone was stunned and their jaws nearly dropped to the ground. Shenmengqi's mind was in a state of chaos. Zimo. The third princess was referring to him as Zimo? Why was she calling him so intimately? What rights did she have? Ji Yaoshua's question was vague and no one understood what she was asking. However, she knew that Su Zimo would definitely understand. After all, that pale yellow dress was personally gifted to her by this person. Su Zimo nodded. Very beautiful. The next moment, she smiled like a flower. Chapter 308, It's Over for Ethereal Peak. Chapter 308, It's Over for Ethereal Peak. In this woman's heart, no amount of praises from anyone else could compare with the two words he had just said. The woman's smile stunned everyone, causing their hearts to flutter. Many cultivators froze on the spot, unable to recover from their shocks. There was something wrong with the conversation. What were those two doing right in front of everyone? Many cultivators initially had fantasies towards the third princess of Great Dew. But now, they felt a sharp pain in their chests as though they had been severely injured. Shuiyi muttered in disbelief, this junior brother Su actually knows the third princess? Hee. Little Fatty pinched his chubby chin as the flames of gossip burned in his eyes. With a perverted smile, he said, from the looks of it, their relationship isn't simple at all. Dao Feng's face darkened as he looked at Su Zimo with obvious hostility. Sai Yutong had long returned to the crowd after his utter embarrassment. He had a glum expression and snorted. What's going on? She isn't here for senior brother Jun? Who is that man? Why is he so close to senior sister Yaoshue? Many of the Azure Frost sect disciples frowned and whispered among themselves. Jun Hao took a deep breath and lowered his eyes. His hands behind his back were clenched so tightly that veins popped out of them for a brief moment before disappearing thereafter. Ji Yaoshue was delighted upon receiving Su Zimo's acknowledgement and said softly, "Wait here for a while. The sect competition is about to start." "Yes." Su Zimo nodded. "I'll head over first then." Smiling for a moment, Ji Yaoshue waved at Su Zimo before turning to leave in front of everyone. Her actions earlier were rather bold and she had mustered up her courage. Now that she thought about it, her heart was still pounding. In addition to the burning gazes around her, even though she was a princess, she could not help but feel a little shy and embarrassed to continue staying. Ji Yaoshue noticed the occasional shyness and gentleness revealed by Ji Yaoshue. He could not help but frown with a subtle sadness in his eyes. Right after, his expression changed and his eyes flickered in thought. Something was not right. There was something off about what Ji Yaoshue said. She said that the sect competition was about to start and asked Su Zimo to stay here for a while. What was she going to do after that? Or rather, what was this Su Zimo going to do? Wasn't he merely going to take part in the sect competition? "I'll head over first then." That was Ji Yaoshue's second sentence. It did not sound like much at first glance, but after thinking about it carefully, there was more to it. As a princess of the Great Dew dynasty, the place where Ji Yaoshue was headed was the second spectator area. Why would she tell Su Zimo that she was heading over first? Unless, the reason why Ji Yaoshue said that was because Su Zimo was going to head over to the same place? But, was that possible? What rights does a foundation establishment cultivator like him from Ethereal Peak have compared to the status of the other people seated at the second spectator area? Subtly, Jun Hao surveyed his surroundings. Many cultivators were excited as they discussed fervently about the peerless beauty of the third princess as well as her relationship with Su Zimo. There were also some people who were still immersed in the previous scene and were in low spirits, unable to extricate themselves. Apart from him, no one else noticed the abnormality in Ji Yaoshue's words. "Perhaps I'm overthinking it." Jun Hao muttered to himself. "I've got it." Right then, a cultivator in the crowd suddenly said something as though he had discovered a huge secret. "What?" someone else asked. The person said slowly, "Have you guys noticed that there's a seat left in the second spectator area after the third princess took her seat?" "Yeah, so what?" The person smiled smugly and replied, "I dare to bet that the seat is reserved for Mr. Mo." Many cultivators pondered for a while before they came to a realization. That's right, it must be Mr. Mo. Yes, only Mr. Mo is qualified. That seat is alongside the princes and princesses and is merely beneath a single person. Indeed, only Mr. Mo is able to suppress every other golden core out there. When he heard the discussions around him, Junhao let out a long breath and burst out in laughter. Since that seat is reserved for Mr. Mo, it has nothing to do with Su Zimo. In that case, I have indeed been overthinking things. In reality, among the spectators, the elders of True Fire sect had seen how Mr. Mo looked like in the palace. However, there was a huge distance between the spectator area and the sunken area. Furthermore, there were more than 100,000 Foundation establishment cultivators, making the crowd seem like a black patch. The elders were not paying attention to that side at all. Most of the golden cores at the spectator area were chatting merrily as they toasted one another. Even though the sect competition was between the Foundation establishment cultivators, it was also an opportunity for many golden cores to expand their networks and influence. Senior brother, what are you thinking about? Xian Yi was staring at the large crowd of Foundation establishment cultivators in a daze with a hint of melancholy on his face. When Liu Hui saw that, she could not help but feel worried and asked. Retracting his gaze, Xian Yi shook his head. It's nothing. A commotion broke out in the crowd from afar earlier. In that confusion, he seemed to have caught sight of the sleeves of a familiar-looking set of green robes. However, it was drowned in the crowd in the blink of an eye. Xian Yi sighed gently, knowing that he was merely hallucinating out of mental exhaustion. Fellow Daoist Xian Yi. Right then, a greeting sounded from the side. Glancing over, Xian Yi caught sight of the person who spoke, Perfected Being Kang Lang of Iridescent Cloud's Palace. Perfected Being Kang Lang raised his glass and asked with a smile, I heard that Ethereal Peak has an inner sect disciple called Su Zimo. I wonder whose disciple he is. Xian Yi frowned. Why the question, fellow Daoist Kang Lang? Fu, nothing much. Perfected Being Kang Lang laughed gently. I've got some grudges with that kid and I want to ask for him from Ethereal Peak. I wonder if you could do me the favor. No. Xian Yi rejected him without thinking twice. Perfected Being Kang Lang narrowed his long eyes slightly. He said slowly with a darkened expression, that person killed 2 of my sect's disciples. How should we settle that debt? They have no one to blame for dying due to their inferiority in skills. Don't you find it shameful for a golden core like yourself to come seek revenge? Xian Yi sneered. Perfected Being Kang Lang replied leisurely, Xian Yi, let me advise you not to ruin the relationship between Iridescent Cloud's Palace and Ethereal Peak over a mere Foundation establishment cultivator. Are you representative of the entire Iridescent Cloud's Palace, Perfected Being Kang Lang? With just a few words, the both of them were already at odds. Right then, someone beside laughed sinisterly. Brother Kang Lang, there's no need to engage in a verbal battle with him. Ethereal Peak is already declining and yet he is so tough with his words. He's only asking for trouble. Sima Ji, what are you trying to do? Xian Yi's expression changed slightly. Perfected Being Kang Lang laughed. Brother Sima, what do you need from me? Sima Ji of True Fire sect remarked casually, Ethereal Peak merely brought a couple of people this time round. As long as our sects join forces for the spirit ranking competition, Ethereal Peak can do nothing even if they have a 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. Very well, we'll let Ethereal Peak return empty-handed without a single spot this time round. A look of mockery flashed in Perfected Being Kang Lang's eyes as he laughed. One of the 5 major sects. Fufu, it's over for Ethereal Peak. Chapter 309, please head to the spectator area. Chapter 309, please head to the spectator area. Despicable. Xian Yi clenched his fists and cursed through gritted teeth. To begin with, Ethereal Peak was already weaker for this sect competition with only a single 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator who could compete. If he was specifically targeted, they would stand no chance at all. Roar. Right then, a heaven-shaking roar could be heard from the distant horizon, shaking the entire void in an extremely imposing manner. Everyone's hearts skipped a beat as they looked over. 5 massive and ferocious lions rushed over side by side with an aggressive momentum. They were covered with golden fur from head to toe without any impurities, as though their bodies were burning with golden flames. Those are golden lions. Golden lions are ancient remnant beasts that are at Golden Core realm. The 5 golden lions were tied with iron chains and dragged an ancient war chariot behind them. On it, a middle-aged man stood wearing a long golden robe. His eyes were like lightning, exuding authority by themselves, and he exuded a domineering aura that swept across the world. The man on the chariot was none other than the Emperor of Great Jew. "Greetings, Your Majesty." All the Imperial Army soldiers knelt on one knee and roared in unison. They were so loud that it was terrifying. All the golden cores at the spectator area got up hurriedly and cupped their fists, nodding in acknowledgement. "Soldiers, please rise. Everyone, please sit." The Emperor's tone was calm as he leaped down from the war chariot. Arriving at the highest seat of the spectator area, he sat down. I finally caught sight of the Emperor of Great Jew. We didn't come for this sect competition in vain. What a strong aura. I almost knelt down because of it too. Around the 4 jade pillars, many Foundation establishment cultivators were impressed by the magnificence of the Emperor as they discussed excitedly in hushed voices. Su Zimo's expression was indifferent and his eyes were calm as water. It was as though he was unaffected by the Emperor's arrival. Shun Mangchi swept her glance over and asked in a seemingly casual manner, "Su Zimo, how did you know the Princess of Great Jew? What has it got to do with you?" Su Zimo asked instead without even looking at Shun Mangchi. She harumphed coldly. "Shun Mangchi, don't be smug. What's so great about knowing the princess? Besides, let me remind you that you were already enemies of Iridescent Cloud's Palace and True Fire sect to begin with. Now, even the disciples of Azure Frost sect are showing signs of hostility towards you because of the princess." Scoffing coldly, Shun Mangchi continued, "The princess's actions have unknowingly established many powerful foes for you. Let's see how you deal with things later on." Su Zimo smiled calmly. Spectator area. The Emperor pushed his hands down the air and the crowd gradually quietened. In a low voice, the Emperor said, "The sect competition's about to begin soon. Before this, I want to introduce a weapon refinement master that I believe everyone has heard of. The #1 weapon refinement master of Great Jew, Mr. Mo Ling. Of course we know about him." Many golden cores at the spectator area smiled and nodded with anticipation in their eyes. The Emperor continued, "Although all of you have heard of his name, not many have seen his true appearance." "That's right." Perfected being Yi Ning smiled bitterly. "Previously, I wanted to thank Mr. Mo personally. It's a pity I didn't get to meet him." Perfected being Yun Shan of Southern Mountains sect nodded as well. "That's right. Mr. Mo is way too mysterious." The Emperor smiled and said, "I invited Mr. Mo here to be the judge of the weapon refinement segment for the sect competition this time round. Soon, all of you will be able to meet him." Many golden cores were shaken. Which golden core wouldn't want to befriend a weapon refinement master who could customize supreme-grade spirit weapons? Perfected being Kang Lang narrowed his eyes and scanned the surroundings. He wanted to see who exactly this Mr. Mo was and what grudges they had such that the latter humiliated him in public. Around the 4 jade pillars, many Foundation establishment cultivators stared at the distant sky with widened eyes, wanting to see the legendary Mr. Mo at the first instance. "How do you guys think Mr. Mo's going to arrive?" "Don't worry, his entrance will definitely not be lesser compared to the princes and princesses. Given Mr. Mo's status and strength, I believe he can even ride a pure-blooded ferocious beast over." Everyone discussed excitedly. Little Fatty turned around as well and asked excitedly, "Bro, how old do you think Mr. Mo is? How does he look like?" Su Zimo replied, "In his 20s. Ha ha ha." The moment Su Zimo spoke, everyone burst into laughter. Many people looked at Su Zimo as though they were looking at an idiot. Dao Feng's eyes were filled with mockery as he chuckled. Weapon refinement masters of Ethereal Peak are truly jokes. Fufu. Shun Mangchi frowned. "Su Zimo, if you don't know, just say that you don't know. Nobody is going to blame you for that. By spouting nonsense, You will only attract ridicule by others and expose your ignorance.
Oh.
Su Zimo raised his brow. Shun Mangchi continued in a low voice, Mr. Mo can customize supreme-grade spirit weapons. Do you think that someone in his 20s can do that? Even someone like me who doesn't know how to refine weapons know of that logic. At that moment, the Emperor's voice sounded once more. In fact, Mr. Mo has long arrived and is amongst you guys.
Ah.
Mr. Mo is already here?
Where?
At the spectator area, all the golden cores turned around instinctively, only to realize that the people around them were also looking back with confused expressions. The Emperor raised his voice, Mr. Mo, please head to the spectator area. The moment he finished speaking, more than 1,000 golden cores and more than 100,000 Foundation establishment cultivators fell silent suddenly. Everyone scanned their surroundings constantly with bated breaths. Everyone from Ethereal Peak, Dao Feng, Jun Hao, Sai Yutang and Shen Mengqi were searching instinctively as well. All of a sudden, a figure moved past the crowd, attracting the attention of everyone. Su Zimo, what are you doing? Shen Mengqi frowned and yelled. Su Zimo was unmoved. Dao Feng laughed coldly. This guy really doesn't know any better. He's even acting brazenly before the Emperor. They're calling for Mr. Mo, not you, Shen Mengqi shouted again. However, her expression changed starkly, as though she had suddenly realized something. Seemingly oblivious to everything, Su Zimo continued to walk forward. He patted little Fatty who was dumbstricken on the shoulders and smiled faintly before exiting the crowd. Jun Hao of Azure Frost Sect shuddered as he looked at Su Zimo's back view, guessing a vague possibility. It did not matter how absurd or crazy that possibility was. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo was exposed in the midst of more than 100,000 Foundation establishment cultivators. Under everyone's scorching gazes, Su Zimo did not look uneasy at all. Instead, he walked forward calmly with his hands behind his back. Crossing the sunken area, he headed towards the spectator area. Who is that person? Why is he heading there? He's only in his 20s, he can't be Mr. Mo. That's right. How can Mr. Mo be a Foundation establishment cultivator? Many cultivators in the crowd sneered. After sneering, everyone looked at Su Zimo who was getting further away from them. Suddenly, a strange silence filled the crowd. A weak voice sounded, none of us have ever met Mr. Mo before. Why can't he be a Foundation establishment cultivator in his 20s? No one replied. Everyone was waiting for an answer. Chapter 310 All eyes were on him. Chapter 310 All eyes were on him. In the spectator area, the many golden cores started scanning their surroundings and discussing the moment the Emperor finished his sentence. All of them wanted to spot Mr. Mo right away. Some golden cores noticed a green-robed cultivator approaching from afar, but they did not take it to heart. That was a Foundation establishment cultivator in his 20s after all, and no one paid attention. However, as time passed by, no one within the spectator area stood forth. However, the green-robed cultivator who was headed over approached closer and closer. More golden cores were starting to notice this. Elder Zhong of True Fire Sect had met Mo Ling in the palace before. When he caught sight of the green-robed cultivator heading over, he merely harumphed. However, Elder Zhong focused his gaze immediately after and it remained stuck on the sect badge that was hanging on the green-robed cultivator's waist. While he had indeed caught sight of Mo Ling's appearance before, he did not know of the latter's true identity, let alone know what the latter had to do with Ethereal Peak. Sima Ji frowned and asked, Elder Zhong, haven't you met this Mo Ling before? Where is he? How could this be? How could this be? HHE's from Ethereal Peak. Elder Zhong did not seem to have heard anything as he muttered to himself in a lost manner. Golden cores of the 5 major sects were seated in the third spectator area. All of them noticed Elder Zhong's abnormality and looked down in the direction of his gaze. The golden cores of Azure Frost Sect and Southern Mountains Sect did not have much of a reaction, merely frowning. They were puzzled as to why this Foundation establishment cultivator of Ethereal Peak was walking over. However, Perfected being Kang Lang narrowed his eyes and there was a flash of killing intent in them. Su Zimo. Do you think that I won't be able to lay my hands on you because you have ethereal peak backing you? Perfected being Kang Lang sneered and finished his wine in one gulp. Ah! Liu Hui gasped and looked at the green-robed cultivator who was afar in disbelief. Xian Yi's expression changed as well. In the midst of his emotional turmoil, he leaped up with joy in his eyes. He's not dead. He was indeed still alive. At that moment, Xian Yi suddenly felt much relieved. The fact that Su Zimo wasn't dead meant that he would have a successor for his sword formation techniques. Perhaps, if Su Zimo were to head back and cultivate for another 10 years, with his talent, he might be able to leave his name on the weapon ranking for the next sect competition. Or perhaps, if he were to train for another 10 years, Su Zimo might even be able to vie for the spirit ranking. At that thought, Xian Yi could not help but smile to himself. It did not matter even if Ethereal Peak did not obtain a single spot for the sect competition this time round. Su Zimo's survival meant that there was still hope for Ethereal Peak. If when Xian knew that you were still alive, perhaps he would feel better. Xian Yi lamented internally. Many golden cores frowned in displeasure as they watched the approaching green-robed cultivator below the spectator area. After all, the seats were only meant for golden cores and not any random Foundation Establishment cultivators. Even a Foundation Establishment cultivator from Ethereal Peak was not spared from the rules. The discussions in the spectator area grew louder as many golden cores were upset. At the entrance of the spectator, the 3 guard squad commanders, the bearded man, Bai Yuhan and Bald Vulture were calm and ignored everyone. Hey! One of the golden cores drank quite a bit and his cheeks were red. With alcohol bolstering his courage, he stood up and shouted to the 3 commanders. Fellow Taoist. Who is that? The man raised his wine glass and pointed to Su Zimo unsteadily while burping. The 3 commanders lowered their eyes and remained silent. The person's body swayed and looked intoxicated as he shouted, "This is the spectator area for golden cores. What's that person doing here? You guys are guards of the capital and Imperial Army soldiers. Why aren't you chasing him away?" The 3 commanders remained motionless, as if they had not heard anything. The discussion in the spectator area quietened gradually. Some of the sharper cultivators slowly regained their senses. The 3 commanders were not stopping the green-robed cultivator who was approaching, and the Emperor was being silent about it as well. What did that mean? Pest! Many cultivators gasped and their expressions changed. Could it be? Could that young Foundation Establishment cultivator be? The drunk golden core sobered up a little as well. Shaking his head, he struggled to open his eyes and look at the approaching person. At that moment, the gazes of more than 1,000 golden cores and more than 100,000 Foundation Establishment cultivators landed on that green-robed cultivator who was about to step on the golden carpet. All eyes were on him. Su Zimo arrived before the spectator area and the 3 commanders on both sides bowed with cupped fists. "Please take your seat, Mr. Mo." Nodding his head, Su Zimo stepped on the golden carpet and walked up with a calm expression. Boom. Those words fell as if a gigantic rock was thrown into the middle of a calm lake surface, causing a storm to brew in everyone's heart. The massive square was completely silent at that moment, as though everyone was strangled by an invisible force and could not breathe. It was the same at the spectator area as well. Above and below, time seemed to have stopped. Everyone was petrified on the spot motionlessly, and the green-robed cultivator on the golden carpet was the only one who was continuing with his footsteps one by one. Clang! The wine glass in the hands of the drunken golden core fell to the ground with a resounding clash. That sound seemed to break the frozen time. Breaking out in cold sweat, that person sobered up instantly and shuddered at the thought of what he had just said. He cupped his fists and bowed hurriedly, saying with a frantic expression, "GG greetings, Mr. Mo." The cultivators at the bottom spectator area were all itinerant cultivators. Most of the itinerant cultivators had not experienced massive events, and coupled with how prominent Mo Ling's name was, they were shocked, some of them even jolted up instinctively. "Mr. Mo! Mr. Mo!" As Su Zimo advanced, rows of golden cores stood up on both sides of the spectator area, bowing with cupped fists. It was a spectacular sight. It was a formidable event. At that moment, everyone forgot about the age and cultivation of that man before them. All they could feel was shock and awe coming from the green-robed cultivator. He had an aura superior to everything that was impossible to resist. The higher the stairs, the greater the strength and status of the golden cores on both sides. Initially, some of the golden cores at the back had no intention of standing up to greet because of their statuses. However, they were helpless against the hundreds of golden cores before them who were standing up. They would seem like eyesores if they continued sitting. With almost no time to contemplate, coupled with the fact that their minds were in a mess, they stood up automatically when Suzimo approached. As Suzimo walked, the golden cores at the spectator area had all turned into part of the background. Well. Xian Yi's heart skipped a beat as he remarked repeatedly. Even as a golden core, Liu Hui covered her mouth with reddened eyes. Finally, she could not contain her emotions and cried. When they arrived in the capital, they had suffered too much ridicule and mocking gazes. News of how Ethereal Peak was weakened, how Ethereal Peak could not hang on anymore, and how they were about to be kicked out of the 5 major sects spread endlessly. She had no way of refuting all of that. But at this moment, all of those rumors were gone with the wind. She finally understood why the 3 commanders told them that Ethereal Peak was about to become famous again. From this day forth, who would dare claim that Ethereal Peak has nobody worthy? Chapter 311, Regret. Chapter 311, Regret. Under everyone's watchful gazes, in front of all the golden cores who were greeting with cupped fists, Suzimo came before Xian Yi and Liu Hui. He bowed deeply and said in a deep voice, "Disciple of Ethereal Peak, Suzimo, pays his greetings to the Peak Masters. Ji, good child. Hurry, get up." Xian Yi hurried forward and raised Suzimo's arms in an emotional manner. "So, Mr. Mo's real name is Suzimo. Mr. Mo is so young. His only at Foundation establishment. Didn't everyone say that Ethereal Peak is bad at weapon refinement? Why did such a monster appear out of nowhere? This is phenomenal." Many golden cores muttered softly as they looked at Suzimo curiously. Liu Hui turned and wiped her tears, laughing and saying, "Xian Yi, stop pulling him. Let him get to his seat." Right. Xian Yi snapped to his senses and replied, "Hurry over. We'll talk when we get back. We've got plenty of time." "Yes." Suzimo nodded and turned to continue forward. His gaze landed on perfected being Kang Lang, who was not far away. Their eyes met. Suzimo smiled. Perfected being Kang Lang glared at the approaching Suzimo with an ashen face. He truly could not bring himself to smile. How could this be? 3 years ago, when he heard that Suzimo had also become a cultivator, perfected being Kang Lang merely laughed indifferently. There was no way Suzimo could ever catch up to him even if the former had stepped into cultivation. In his eyes, Suzimo was still the same and that he could trample, suppress and oppress as he willed. However, that small ant had merely grown a little more. He had cultivated for more than 200 years. What was his identity, strength and status like? Even the connections that he had accumulated over the past 200 years were more than enough for him to crush that Suzimo. But now, the moment Suzimo stepped foot on the golden carpet, perfected being Kang Lang realized that apart from his own strength, all his advantages were no longer existent. He could not compare with Suzimo in terms of status, influence, and connections. Or rather, he could not compare with Mr. Mo. A month ago, right at the entrance of Mo's spirit weapon workshop, Suzimo promised that his head could be exchanged for a supreme-grade spirit weapon. At that moment, perfected being Kang Lang could clearly feel that many golden cores were tempted, some of them even revealed their killing intents. If not for the fact that he was in the capital and no one would dare to act rashly, there was a high chance he would have been mass attack. That was the unique way in which fate worked. In the past, perfected being Kang Lang could delete Suzimo's life with a flick of his fingers. But now, his head was almost gone just because of a promise from Suzimo. As he passed by perfected being Kang Lang, Suzimo paused for a moment and turned to glance indifferently. That single glance sent a chill down perfected being Kang Lang's spine. He realized that the frail youth in the past was now a deep thorn in his flesh. In the square, More than 100,000 Foundation establishment cultivators were stunned. Apart from everyone of Ethereal Peak who were cheering, the other cultivators had complex expressions. Earlier on, everyone thought that Suzimo was a joke. It was only at this moment that they realized that they were the true jokes. Jun Hao of Azure Frost Sect let out a long sigh. Even though he had expected it, the blow was still rather huge when the outcome was truly known. Dao Feng of True Fire Sect had a dark expression on his face. Each time he recalled what he had just said, his face turned paler. Hey, fellow Daoist Dao Feng, you seem like you were upset when my bro said that you're not qualified? Little Fatty asked with a grin. Dao Feng's expression was grim as he remained silent. TSK, TSK, TSK. Little Fatty pursed his lips and asked, who was the one who was so arrogant that he wanted to compete with my bro in terms of weapon refinement? Why is he silent right now? Don't be a coward. Dao Feng clenched his teeth and shivered. However, he could not say a word. He had said too much earlier on. But now, every single word he said was being smashed back onto his face, causing it to burn. Beside Dao Feng, a cold and sinister man stood glaring at Suzimo in the spectator area with a killing intent in his eyes. Recalling that he had provoked Suzimo earlier on, Sai Yutong felt a little guilty and laughed dryly. Who would have thought that he would be Mr. Moha, ha. No one cared about him, so it was a little awkward. Isn't that right, junior sister? Sai Yutong turned to ask. Shun Mengqi, who was beside him, seemed to have not heard anything. She stared blankly at the spectator area where that figure was getting further and rising higher, as though she had lost her soul. Instantly, many things made sense to her. Why Mr. Mo would send that message for her master, perfected being Kang Lang, to kneel down a month ago? Why Suzimo would dare declare that Dao Feng wasn't qualified? Why Suzimo was indifferent at the mention of Mr. Mo? Why Suzimo would look at her strangely when she mentioned Mr. Mo? Why even the third princess of Great Ju would head over? Why? All of those questions could be explained with a single answer. Suzimo was Mr. Mo. At that moment, she suddenly felt like a fool. The princess's actions have unknowingly established many powerful foes for you. Let's see how you deal with things later on. Shun Mengqi laughed at herself when she recalled what she had said earlier. There was no need for Suzimo to deal with things. The moment he revealed his identity, it was more than enough. Shun Mengqi was dazed. Once upon a time, she thought that she would soar through the skies upon receiving that one in a million immortal affinity. She thought that she would be separated from Suzimo and become someone of a completely different world from him. But now, she suddenly realized. Everything she had possessed in the past couple of years was nothing worth mentioning in front of Suzimo. Her life was perhaps lesser than a single promise of Suzimo. In that instant, Shun Mengqi regretted. Before long, Suzimo arrived at the second spectator area where there was only an empty seat. It was a seat that was beneath a single person and above everyone else, one that ranked equally with the princes, princesses, and the chief steward of Sky Treasure Auction House. The emperor pointed and said, "Go on." Suzimo nodded. Ji Yaoshue was beside the empty seat. Both of them smiled at each other. The moment Suzimo sat down, a gust of fragrant wind blew over. Right after, someone else appeared on the other side of Suzimo. He turned over and was slightly stunned. Demonis Ji had moved her chair and ran to his left-hand side to squeeze with him. As such, Suzimo's seat was sandwiched between the two princesses. Coughing gently, Suzimo looked somewhat uneasy instantly. I'll sit here. Demonis Ji chuckled. Ji Yaoshue looked at her younger sister dotingly and shook her head to smile. The princes seemed to understand Demonis Ji's temper and did not say anything, merely smiling. Instead, they nodded to Suzimo as a form of greeting. Suzimo's heart skipped a beat. Even though no one could tell, he could vaguely sense that Demonis Ji's laughter was odd. I wonder what this Demonis is thinking about again. Frowning in secret, Suzimo looked straight ahead. Right then, the emperor's voice echoed in all directions. Let the sect competition officially begin. Chapter 312 I'll teach you how to refine weapons. Chapter 312 I'll teach you how to refine weapons. The rules of the sect competition are the same as the previous ones. For the 4 ranking lists of spirit, talisman, elixir, and weapon, we'll choose the top 10 of each as the experts for this year's competition. All 10 people on the spirit ranking can choose a spirit art of their liking. All 10 on the talisman ranking can choose a talisman method. All 10 on the elixir ranking can choose an elixir recipe. All 10 on the weapon ranking can choose a superior grade spirit weapon. Of course, apart from that, there will be a reward of many spirit stones. The Great Zhou dynasty had been established for more than 10,000 years. After so many years of accumulation and heritage, there was definitely going to be many secret skills and elixir recipes in their treasure vault. In fact, some of them might even be extinct, and it was definitely enough to tempt any cultivator out there. Most Foundation establishment cultivators merely used middle-grade spirit weapons. For Foundation establishment cultivators, superior-grade spirit weapons were fatally attractive. Of course, the most important thing was that the people on the ranking lists could enter the ancient battlefield to train for a year. With just a few simple words from the Emperor, the 100,000-odd Foundation establishment cultivators on the square were burning with zeal and raring to go. The Emperor declared, "Since Mr. Mo was invited as the judge for this sect competition, we'll start off with the competition for weapon refinement. Because Mr. Mo belongs to Ethereal Peak and needs to enter the ancient battlefield as well, it means that there are only 9 spots left to contest for in the weapon ranking." The meaning behind the Emperor's words was clear. Given Su Zimo's ability, he was naturally the number 1 on the weapon ranking without the need to even compete. No one had any objections to that. Even weapon refinement masters who had been immersed in the art of weapon refinement for hundreds of years would not dare to compete against Su Zimo, let alone the young weapon refinement masters on the square. "Is there anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Mo?" the Emperor asked. Rising, Su Zimo gazed at the 100,000-odd Foundation establishment cultivators on the square deeply before saying in a slow manner, "When I arrived, I heard someone mention that there is no one from Ethereal Peak who can refine weapons." Upon hearing this, the square and the spectator area entered an uproar. If it was prior to this, those words wouldn't have been a big deal since it was something everyone publicly acknowledged. But now, anyone who dared say something as such was definitely stubbing their toes. Everyone swept their gazes and noticed that Su Zimo had a hint of killing intent on his face. They all realized that the number 1 weapon refinement master of Great Zhou was about to take someone down. Who was the one who said that? "Stand forth." Su Zimo was almost at the top of the spectator area as he looked down at the square from above. Even though his tone was calm, it was laced with a dominance that was above everyone else. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Countless gazes landed on Dao Feng. Prior to this, everyone around the area had witnessed the conflict between Dao Feng and Su Zimo. Dao Feng felt the pressure on him multiply, his face was pale and his expression was filled with fear. "Who is Mr. Mo talking about?" "Someone from True Fire sect. I heard that he's the number 1 weapon refinement master of the younger generation." "Phut, what a joke. Mr. Mo is only in his 20s and this guy dares to claim that he's the number 1 weapon refinement master of the younger generation?" The discussions in the crowd grew louder. The crowd around True Fire sect gradually dispersed. Seeing that he was about to be singled out, Dao Feng grit his teeth and stood out with a venomous look in his eyes. He said hatefully, "It was me." The golden cause of True Fire sect frowned with ugly expressions. "Very good." Su Zimo nodded. "Since you were so arrogant, I suppose that the standards of weapon refinement masters from True Fire sect must have already surpassed me. Which one of you is so formidable? Stand forth and let me have a look." Sweeping his gaze across True Fire sect's golden cause at the spectator area, Su Zimo's eyes had a mocking look in them. "Su Zimo, don't go overboard," Elder Zhong said coldly. "Overboard?" Su Zimo shook his head and replied indifferently, "I don't think so. Compared to that unscrupulous assassination attempt from True Fire sect 3 years ago, this is nothing." Elder Zhong was speechless. Although there was no evidence of it, everyone was well aware of it. In fact, Even the Emperor's notice was posted at the entrance of True Fire Weapon Workshop. Su Zimo is trying to establish his dominance. Yes, it's not only for himself, it's also for Ethereal Peak. This is equivalent to taking revenge for Ethereal Peak. Upon hearing the discussions around them, Xian Yi and Liu Hui exchanged glances. Both could read the gratification in the other's eyes. After Su Zimo appeared, they could clearly sense that the few disciples of Ethereal Peak were in high spirits and were no longer demoralized. Turning towards Dao Feng, Su Zimo continued, "You even said that the weapon refinement masters of Ethereal Peak are jokes? Let me ask you now, who is the joke?" Dao Feng was almost grinding his teeth into dust as his entire body trembled. Lowering his head slightly, his cheeks were filled with ferociousness and his eyes were getting more deranged by the second. "Su Zimo, I'm not convinced of you." Suddenly, Dao Feng raised his head and shouted with reddened eyes, "There are more than 100,000 cultivators present, but no one has witnessed you refine weapons personally. Who knows if you're as good as you claim to be? Why are you able to claim a spot on the weapon ranking without even having to refine weapons?" Dao Feng seemed to have lost his mind, but in reality, his words struck lethally. Su Zimo was only in his 20s and was at Foundation Establishment realm. However, he was able to customize supreme-grade spirit weapons. That did seem a little ridiculous. Even if he had started refining weapons in his mother's womb, that would only be 20-odd years at best. Could he really be better than weapon refinement masters out there who have immersed themselves in the art of weapon refinement for hundreds of years? Everyone present had doubts to begin with. After Dao Feng's words, their suspicions only intensified. Could there be someone powerful expert backing Su Zimo? That expert would step in when it came to refining weapons while Su Zimo was only a front. After all, no one had seen Su Zimo refine weapons before. Many people thought about it and pondered to themselves, if the Mo from Mo Ling came from Su Zimo, could the Ling be from the expert? That thought seemed to have gotten them closer to the truth of things. The way many cultivators looked at Su Zimo changed slowly, carrying doubt and scrutiny within their gazes. In the blink of an eye, Dao Feng was now the center of attention as he laughed into the skies. "Su Zimo, if you have the guts, come and compete with me down here. We'll let everyone judge who the joke is. I believe that everyone would like to see your so-called Mo clan's spirit gathering technique." The Emperor's expression was calm as he thought to himself, impressive. With those words, True Fire Sect was going to benefit no matter what. If Su Zimo was not as good as he claimed to be, he would naturally be exposed by competing and Dao Feng would become famous because of this. Even if Su Zimo truly was Mo Ling, he might end up committing a mistake under such immense pressure in front of everyone. Furthermore, this would not be of any loss for True Fire Sect as they would be able to observe Su Zimo's weapon refinement process and even possibly get a glimpse of the secrets within. "You want to learn my spirit gathering technique?" Su Zimo's heart stirred as he could tell Dao Feng's intentions. However, he did not have to fear letting others watch or learn from his spirit gathering technique. After all, no one would be able to master it. The weapon refinement masters of Ethereal Peak had that tragic experience. Whoever that learned from him were the unlucky ones. "Su Zimo, do you dare to compete? Say something." Dao Feng shouted provocatively. "I'm not going to compete with you, because you're not qualified." However, changing the topic, Su Zimo continued calmly, "In a bit, I'll teach you how to refine spirit weapons on the spot. Learn well and don't embarrass True Fire Sect." "I'll teach you." It was the tone and attitude of an elder teaching the younger generation. Everyone was dumbfounded. Chapter 313, What Weapon Refinement Truly Is. Chapter 313, What Weapon Refinement Truly Is. "I'll teach you how to refine weapons." Against Dao Feng's challenge, Su Zimo's single statement widened the gap between them instantly. He. Dao Feng laughed coldly. "I'll see for myself what Mr. Mo has to teach me." The Emperor waved his hand. "Let the competition for the weapon ranking officially begin." As the Emperor finished his sentence, cultivators taking part in the weapon ranking competition broke free from the crowd and arrived at the spacious sunken area between the four jade pillars. Dao Feng walked over. His gaze was provocative and had never left Su Zimo. All the best, senior brother Shui. Junior brother Shui, go on. With junior brother Su around, you can just give it all you've got without any pressure. Under the encouragement of little Fatty, Leng Ru and the others, Shui Yi arrived at the sunken area as well. He was filled with confidence, spirited and in a perfect state. Shui Yi knew that given his current state, there was even a chance he could outperform himself. Su Zimo sat high and above, unmoving as he watched everything quietly without any intention of getting up. No matter what, he was the judge selected by the emperor. His position was unshakable. There was no restriction to the type of spirit weapon one could refine for the weapon ranking competition. However, each person only had 3 chances. Within 3 rounds of weapon refinement, they had to select the spirit weapon with the best grade and quality for the final evaluation. If they failed all 3 rounds of weapon refinement, it would mean that they have lost the rights to compete. There were a total of 1,072 weapon refinement masters taking part in the sect competition this time round, and they were all gathered in the sunken area. Almost at the same time, all of them took out their weapon tripods and placed it in front of them. Swoosh! Instantly, countless flames soared, illuminating against one another. There were some level 1 spirit fires and even some at level 3. He was warming his tripod. Those who were able to compete in the sect competition were the elites of each sect. Naturally, they were extremely familiar with the process of weapon refinement. The many cultivators had long chosen their materials. Right after warming their weapon tripods, they placed their materials within and increased the temperature of the flames to begin smelting. For this step, the higher the level of the flame, the more the impurities that could be purged. Shui Yi had already cultivated a level 2 spirit fire while Dao Feng's spirit fire was at the highest level of 3. Time slowly passed. The first to complete the smelting process was Dao Feng. The next step, forging. After that, tempering. Cultivators from both the spectator area and the square were attracted to Dao Feng's weapon refinement technique as they nodded silently. Dao Feng's technique was indeed far beyond those surrounding him. It was truly rare for someone to have such an understanding and attainment towards weapon refinement at the age of 30. However, another name flashed across everyone's mind right after, and they could not help but turn to look at Su Zimo, who was seated at the top. At that moment, Su Zimo was calm. Dao Feng's brilliant weapon refinement technique did not seem to have any effect on him. Hey! Just as everyone was attracted to the 1,000-odd weapon refinement masters in the square, Demoness Ji snuck to Su Zimo's side. She blew into his ear and called in a seductive manner. Su Zimo was expressionless and did not move. When Demoness Ji caught sight of Su Zimo's slightly stiff body and blushed face, she could not help but purse her lips with a smile. Wheedled, "Second young master Su, you're so biased." The corner of Su Zimo's mouth twitched as he scanned his surroundings with an unnatural expression. When he saw that no one was looking in their direction, he heaved a sigh of relief. Leaning close to Su Zimo's body, Demoness Ji exhaled with the fragrance of flowers and whispered, "I heard that you customized the long robe that my sister is wearing?" Yes, Su Zimo was helpless and could only reply with the truth. "I want one too," Demoness Ji said exasperatedly. "I don't even have clothes that are suitable for me. Look at what I'm wearing. It's not even fitting at all." Su Zimo turned to look instinctively and caught sight of Demoness Ji's fair, white chest. Instantly, he spun his head back and took a deep breath of air while closing his eyes to compose himself. Before he knew it, he had broken out in cold sweat and was looking disheveled. This Demoness. Even though Su Zimo knew full well that these were Demoness Ji's methods of seduction, there was nothing he could do to her. Furthermore, the Emperor was behind him and Ji Yaoshua was beside him. An indescribable sense of excitement plucked at his heartstrings, and it was hard for him to control himself. By now, in the sunken area, Dao Feng was already one with tempering and had begun on spirit gathering. Before long, he gathered his first spirit pattern. Sima Ji of True Fire Sect nodded to himself. He had witnessed Dao Feng's entire weapon refinement process and there were no mistakes at all. There was a high chance a superior grade spirit weapon could be refined. A short while later, another ray of spirit light flash. A second spirit pattern. While it was already a middle-grade spirit weapon, Dao Feng had no intention of stopping. After yet another short while, a third spirit pattern shone in front of everyone. 3 spirit patterns. It was a superior-grade spirit weapon. It was only then that Dao Feng let out a sigh of relief. Before this, he had an extremely high failure rate of refining superior-grade spirit weapons. The fact that he succeeded within a single try today meant that he was in a good condition. By securing a superior-grade spirit weapon in his first round of weapon refinement, Dao Feng ensured that he could continue pushing to try refining spirit weapons of higher grades in his next 2 attempts. Quenching into shape. A superior-grade spirit weapon was formed. A wave of shock and astonishment could be heard from the crowd. There were very few people who could refine superior-grade spirit weapons in the previous sect tournament. By refining a superior-grade spirit weapon on his first attempt, Dao Feng had proven his skills as a weapon refinement master. He turned to Su Zimo, initially wanting to show off his success. However, he realized that Su Zimo was resting on his chair with closed eyes and was not looking at him at all. As time passed by, all the weapon refinement masters were done with their first round of weapon refinements. Some succeeded while others failed. Shui Yi had successfully refined an inferior-grade spirit weapon. He was in no rush to attempt for a middle-grade spirit weapon and was making use of the first round to familiarize himself with the feeling of refining weapons so that he can get himself to his peak form. The 1,000-odd weapon refinement masters rested for a moment before preparing for the second round. Right then, Su Zimo, who was seated high above, suddenly opened his eyes. 2 dazzling lights sparkled for a brief moment before vanishing and calmness returned. Sensing something, many golden cores turned their gazes over. Sima Ji of True Fire Sect said eccentrically, "My, Mr. Mo, are you preparing to attack? As the #1 weapon refinement master of Great Ju, you're not going to be refining a superior-grade spirit weapon as well to hoodwink us, right?" Elder Zhong sneered. The 2 of them had lived for hundreds of years and were no fools. They naturally knew that a person's condition and state of mind had a huge impact towards weapon refinement. That was why they were trying to provoke Su Zimo with their words. Right then, Dao Feng raised his voice and declared, "The great Mr. Mo probably doesn't need 3 rounds. I heard that the Mo clan's spirit gathering technique has an extremely high success rate. Given Mr. Mo's capabilities, a single round should suffice." Pressure. Continuous pressure. As long as Su Zimo's mood was affected, there would definitely be problems in his weapon refinement process. However, in Su Zimo's eyes, those people from True Fire Sect were just like clowns. His spirit gathering technique was completely unrelated to his condition. After 3 years of training, Su Zimo was already well prepared and the doubts and mockery of the outside world could not affect his mental state at all. "You're right. A single round is enough." Su Zimo smiled calmly. Dao Feng, and everyone else from True Fire Sect. Open your eyes wide and clear to see what weapon refinement truly is. Chapter 314, Spirit Saber Refinement. Chapter 314, Spirit Saber Refinement. Bang! Su Zimo arrived at the center of the spectator area and retrieved his weapon tripod from his storage bag, slamming it heavily on the ground with a loud thud. At that moment, it was not only Dao Feng and everyone from True Fire Sect, the 100,000-odd cultivators in the square and the 1,000-odd golden cores at the spectator area. Everyone's gazes were fixed on Su Zimo. The immensity of that pressure was something ordinary people could not understand at all. In the eyes of everyone present, be it whether or not Su Zimo had what it takes, he was way too young. If his mental state and willpower were not resolute enough and he showed any signs of fear, he would definitely be faced with huge problems in his weapon refinement process. With an indifferent expression, Su Zimo gathered a scarlet flame on his palm and began warming the tripod. After the tripod warming, he retrieved pieces of spirit components that emitted strong spirit chi from his storage bag, tossing them into the weapon tripod. Heavens, that's the violet feather rock. That handful of sand is dim and dull. It seems to be lusterless sand. Look. There's also ice silkworm steel, crimson gold crystal and mystic lightning jade. A series of exclamations came from the crowd. Those spirit components were extremely rare, and any one of them would suffice to be used as a core material to create a supreme-grade spirit weapon. But now, he had tossed all of those rare spirit components together. What was he trying to refine? That doubt surfaced in everyone's minds. The more the rare spirit components that were combined, the higher the difficulty of weapon refinement. That was a risk that few weapon refinement masters would dare to take. Before long, all the spirit components were tossed into the weapon tripod. Swoosh! The flames burned furiously at the spirit components in the weapon tripod. Time slowly passed. After smelting, it was time for the forging process. Under the countless gazes, a spirit weapon gradually took shape. At the same time, everyone's eyes gradually widened in shock. What's that? A saber. Holy fuck. Isn't that saber way too big? It even has a handle. If someone were to wield that, putting aside the massive consumption of spirit energy, it would be extremely inconvenient and clumsy. Even if he manages to refine it, it'll be useless. A long saber was gradually formed within Suzumo's weapon tripod. It was half as tall as a person and had an extremely wide width, slightly larger than an adult's palm, a heavy and sturdy saber. Over the past 3 years, Suzumo had refined too many spirit weapons. He had hundreds of supreme-grade spirit weapons. However, Suzumo had never refined a saber that was made for himself. At this moment, Suzumo felt that the time was ripe. A man from True Fire sect said, "That saber has a handle. He should be making it for himself. I heard that he is strong in melee combat." The person who spoke had a cold and sinister gaze that carried a killing intent as he looked at Suzumo. He was He Jiang, a legacy disciple of True Fire sect. His younger brother, He Xing, was the elixir refinement master who died in Suzumo's hands. Unfortunately, he forgot one thing. Dao Feng scoffed coldly. With so many spirit components smelted together, even if all the impurities are purged, the weight of that saber will be terrifying. He won't even be able to lift it. Suzumo was extremely satisfied at the sight of the spirit saber that was gradually forming. He possessed divine power, and yet he did not know anything about saber-wielding techniques. That was the reason why he made such a massive spirit saber that was seemingly clumsy. With that, the spirit saber that was heavy and ferocious to begin with would be able to unleash extremely terrifying attacks when it was coupled with his immense physique and frightening blood chi. After forging was over, tempering started. With spirit energy, Suzumo condensed a pair of big hands that entered the weapon tripod. His fingers struck the blade repeatedly like hammers, letting out a crisp and pleasant sound. Cling. Clang. A moment later, the expressions of many weapon refinement masters present changed. Even though it was hidden in the weapon tripod and they could not see Suzumo's tempering technique, the gap between each striking sound was exactly the same. It was so precise that it was as though everything was calculated. Many golden cores had already realized that Suzumo was undoubtedly Mr. Mo. Ordinary weapon refinement masters would not be able to master such a tempering technique. Furthermore, from the step of material selection to tempering, Suzumo's movements were smooth and fluid like water. It was like a habit of his that was filled with perfection. Saimeji scoffed coldly and thought to himself, "So what if you're Mr. Mo? Once we see your spirit-gathering technique later on, we might be able to grasp at the secrets within." After a long time, tempering was over. A thin layer of sweat filled Suzumo's forehead. With so many spirit components combined, the difficulty of tempering had increased immensely for him as well. After tempering came the most crucial aspect of weapon refinement, spirit gathering. Saimeji could clearly feel Saimeji and everyone else from True Fire sect tense up, watching him intently. "Phew!" He chuckled softly and said, "You want to see my spirit gathering technique? Alright, I'll let you guys see it clearly." Right after, in front of everyone, Suzumo suddenly did something. He removed his weapon tripod. Everyone from Ethereal Peak had already expected it and were relatively calm. However, the other cultivators were horrified. It was especially so for the golden cores who were closest to Suzumo, as they were rattled and wanted to retreat instinctively. However, They realized that they were behaving in an unsightly manner and gave fake coughs while calming themselves down. Without any protection, Suzimo began spirit gathering. Even the emperor frowned when he saw that, not understanding what was the purpose behind Suzimo's actions. The risk of removing the weapon tripod for spirit gathering was way too great. If the first spirit pattern failed, it would be equivalent to the explosion of a pseudo-spirit weapon and the lethality would be limited. However, if he were to fail at the fourth spirit pattern, it would be equivalent to the explosion of a superior-grade spirit weapon and the impact would be rather terrifying. Even if it was a golden core refining the weapon, he would be severely injured given that he would be unprepared to defend. Ji Yaoshue frowned slightly and pursed her cherry lips tightly, concern evident in her eyes. Sister, don't worry. He's Mr. Mo, he'll definitely be fine. Right then, Demoness Ji closed in and held Ji Yaoshue's slightly cold hands while comforting her with a smile. Ji Yaoshue forced a smile but the worry in her eyes did not lessen one bit. Whoosh. Right then, a glow lit up. The first spirit pattern was condensed successfully. Suzimo did not pause and continued to condense the second spirit pattern. Everyone held their breath and continued watching. After a while, another light flashed. The second spirit pattern was condensed successfully. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. Ji Yaoshue's palms were filled with sweat. Even though Suzimo had managed 2 successive spirit patterns, she was even more nervous now. Prior to this, if Suzimo failed in spirit gathering, he would only lose face. However, if he were to fail later on, what he would lose would be his life. Ji Yaoshue would rather Suzimo fail his first 2 spirit patterns than let him get injured. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Suzimo was already condensing his third spirit pattern. Chapter 315, Perfect. Chapter 315, Perfect. The time it took for Suzimo to condense his third spirit pattern was evidently longer. Right from the beginning, everyone from True Fire Sect, Dao Feng included, had been observing Suzimo's every move carefully without letting up a single detail. However, they had not gained much through their observations. They only noticed that Suzimo's spirit gathering process was not completed in one go, but intermittently. At times, although he had already begun with spirit gathering, for some reason, Suzimo would give up and go for a new attempt. There was no pattern to speak of for his repetitions. What's this? Even though Sima Ji and the others had been refining weapons for hundreds of years, none of them had seen such an odd spirit-gathering technique. Whoosh! A slightly blinding glow flashed. Just as everyone was lost, the third spirit pattern was condensed successfully. Swoosh! Xian Yi and Liu Hui heaved a sigh of relief, looking at one another with lingering fear. Even though they had heard of Suzimo's odd spirit-gathering technique back in Ethereal Peak, that was 3 years ago. Furthermore, Suzimo was only able to refine inferior-grade spirit weapons at that time and it was relatively easier to condense a single spirit pattern. But now, Suzimo had already condensed 3 spirit patterns. Ji Yaoshue looked more relaxed and let out a deep breath as well. At that moment, the faces of the golden cores on both sides of Suzimo changed slightly and they felt a little uneasy. When they saw that Suzimo had no intention of stopping after condensing his third spirit pattern, some golden cores could not hold on any longer and retreated hurriedly. At this point, if his spirit gathering failed, it would be equivalent to the explosion of a superior-grade spirit weapon. Golden cores who were not strong enough would be injured on the spot and they would look even more pathetic at that time. There was no need to take that risk for the sake of appearances. Of course, there were some golden cores who pretended to be calm because they were strong and did not leave. On the surface, they watched Suzimo refine his weapon calmly. But in reality, they were on edge and their palms were placed on their storage bags, ready to crush their protection talismans at the first moment to escape if anything awry happened. Just as everyone was feeling uneasy, a beam of light burst forth again in a bedazzling manner. Ah! Exclamations burst forth from the square and the spectator area. The fourth spirit pattern. No one had expected that the fourth spirit pattern would be condensed shortly after the third spirit pattern was formed. 4 spirit patterns, it was a supreme-grade spirit weapon. By now, no one dared to question Suzimo's capabilities in weapon refinement. How confident was he in his spirit-gathering technique to condense 4 spirit patterns without the use of a weapon tripod? Everyone from True Fire sect frowned. The situation was completely different from what they had expected. They could not spot anything from Su Zimo's weapon refinement process at all. Dao Feng glared at Su Zimo coldly and grit his teeth, thinking to himself, supreme-grade spirit weapon, huh? I'll attempt it later on. We don't know who's going to win yet. Congratulations, 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 Mr. Mo. Yet another supreme-grade spirit weapon has been refined by you. The golden cores who had dodged earlier hurried back with cupped fists. However, Su Zimo did not seem to have heard anything. The spirit saber hovered in midair and the surrounding spirit chi had yet to disperse. Staring at the ball of spirit chi, Su Zimo went for another spirit-gathering attempt. Everyone was stunned. What was Su Zimo trying to do? It was already a supreme-grade spirit weapon with 4 spirit patterns at this point. If he were to continue with spirit gathering, it would be a perfect spirit weapon. Su Zimo was trying to refine a perfect spirit weapon. The crowd was in an uproar. Pest. In the spectator area, the expressions of many golden cores changed and they gasped. The few golden cores who had just returned with cupped fists escaped with even greater speed once more. What a fucking lunatic. He's really out of his mind. He's trying to forcefully condense a 5th spirit pattern without the protection of a weapon tripod. Even the group of golden cores who were faking their composure could not sit still anymore as they scurried and fled from Su Zimo with pale faces. What kind of a joke was that? If he were to fail the spirit gathering, it would be equivalent to the explosion of a supreme-grade spirit weapon. At close proximity, they would be dead even if they managed to crush their protection talismans. As for the weapon refinement master himself, he would be blown to bits and pieces. Ji Yaoshue's heart clenched once more. Even Demoness Ji furrowed her brows slightly. She had not expected that Su Zimo would take on such a huge gamble. The Emperor and Chief Steward of Sky Treasure Auction House, Ji Yushi, looked entangled. Apart from worry, they had looks of admiration in their eyes. While the two of them did not know how to refine weapons, they could tell that this was indeed the best opportunity for Su Zimo to create a perfect spirit weapon. After all, the momentum was with him and Lady Luck was shining directly on him as well. For the past 3 years, Su Zimo would spend some time each day on weapon refinement without slacking off at all and his skills climbed steadily. Subsequently, he discovered that it was truly way too difficult if he wanted to refine a perfect spirit weapon. Perfect meant that there couldn't be any flaws at all. In terms of spirit gathering, Su Zimo had no issues. However, there were 6 steps to weapon refinement. He had to achieve perfection with every 6 steps in order to create a perfect spirit weapon. For every step to be perfect, it was not only dependent on the weapon refinement master's skills, it was also on his mental state, condition, and external circumstances. In fact, there was even a tiny bit of luck involved. Luck was something that could only be obtained by chance. Su Zimo had been searching for that mysterious feeling. Along the way, while he was walking up, Su Zimo felt the vague sense of an opportunity. Therefore, when he decided that he was going to display his weapon refinement skills, he was already bent on going for a perfect spirit weapon. For the first 4 steps of weapon refinement, material selection, smelting, forging and tempering, everything went smoothly without any flaws. In terms of spirit gathering, Su Zimo had a 100% success rate. His perfect grade spirit saber was definitely going to be born today. At that thought, Su Zimo felt much more relaxed. Everyone from True Fire sect, do you want to know what's the secret behind Mo Clan's spirit gathering technique? Just as everyone was feeling tense, Su Zimo suddenly asked. Everyone's jaws dropped to the ground in shock. Which weapon refinement master would not give it his all during spirit gathering, which was such a tense segment? How could Su Zimo still have the energy to afford the distraction of speaking? Su Zimo continued, actually, the secret behind Mo Clan's spirit gathering technique is simple. You just have to remove your weapon tripod during spirit gathering and place yourself in a state of death. That way, you can better gather your luck and increase your success rate of spirit gathering. His words were half-truths, Removing the weapon tripod was true, but it had nothing to do with luck. What a load of bullshit. Sima Ji scoffed. To him, those words were filled with loopholes and were utterly ridiculous. Su Zimo smiled calmly without retorting. He knew that the people from True Fire sect would definitely believe him. That was because most of the time, people would rather believe things they had witnessed with their own eyes, even if it was fake. At that moment, a dazzling light shot out like a bright sun, illuminating the void such that everyone could barely open their eyes. The fifth spirit pattern was condensed successfully. Chapter 316, Born from Blood. Chapter 316, Born from Blood. 5 spirit patterns. It was a perfect spirit weapon. A bedazzling light burst out in front of Su Zimo, spreading across the square like a magnificent dawn. Pausing for a brief moment, the light retracted swiftly and entered the blade. No one spoke. It was pitch silent both in the square and at the spectator area. Everyone's eyes were drawn to the gigantic spirit saber that was floating in midair, and their mouths were agape in shock. No matter how illogical the spirit saber seemed with its clumsy appearance and its handle, it was a perfect graded spirit weapon after all. Even golden cores who had lived for hundreds of years might not even be able to see a perfect spirit weapon being born by the end of their lives. How lucky was it for them to be able to witness it personally right now? Perfected being Yun Shan's gaze was burning. Southern Mountains sect was renowned for their melee combat strength and body tempering techniques. In the hands of others, that spirit saber's power was limited. But in his hands, it would definitely be a formidable killing weapon to behold. That perfect grade spirit saber was fatally attractive to him. Everyone from True Fire sect was shocked, then confused. Sima Ji and Elder Zhong, weapon refinement masters who had been immersed in the art of weapon refinement for years, were at a loss as to what to do. Logically speaking, Su Zimo's explanation of removing the weapon tripod was utter bullshit. However, the truth was right before their eyes and they could not help but wonder. Could removing the weapon tripod truly improve one's luck and increase the success rates of spirit gathering? After all, no one had tried that method before. Perhaps that was truly a secret that was yet to be discovered in the world of weapon refinement. However, on second thought, if things were really that simple, would Su Zimo reveal the secret just like that without hiding anything? No matter how they thought about it, they could not figure it out. But the fact was that Su Zimo had managed to condense 5 spirit patterns after removing the weapon tripod. Looking at the spirit saber suspended in midair, Su Zimo heaved a sigh of relief and revealed a bright smile. This refinement had consumed a large amount of spirit, mental and physical energy. He was almost completely exhausted and his entire body was covered in sweat. With the final step, the spirit saber would be completely refined. Su Zimo waved his sleeves and shifted the spirit saber with 5 spirit patterns into cold water that was prepared earlier. 6th step, quenching. Normally, an ear-piercing sound should be heard alongside billowing green smoke due to the rapid cooling of the spirit saber that was heated to a scarlet shade in cold water. The exchange of hot and cold would change the internal structure of the spirit saber, causing it to turn sturdier. At the same time, the spirit patterns would be fused into the saber completely as one. But now, there was no sound nor green smoke being emitted after Su Zimo plunged the spirit saber into cold water. How could that be? Su Zimo's expression changed slightly and he frowned. Right then, a change occurred in the cold water. The water emitted steam and started bubbling. It was boiling. Not only did the basin of water not quench the flames from the spirit saber, it was boiling from the heat emitted by the saber instead. Broop. Broop. As the water boiled, many golden cores stood up one after another to peek. Ha 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 ha. Right then, Sima Ji burst out into laughter with mockery in his eyes. Su Zimo, oh Su Zimo. Your perfect spirit weapon's about to be useless. It's not meant to be yours. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged as he stared at the boiling water darkly, seemingly thinking about something. What's going on? Someone whispered. Sima Ji replied smugly, one can't make any mistakes in the 6 steps of weapon refinement if they want to create a perfect spirit weapon. How can he possibly succeed in quenching a saber with 5 spirit patterns using just ordinary cold water? Suzimo sighed internally. He knew that Sima-ji was not wrong, he had truly not taken this into account. Then again, it was not entirely Suzimo's fault. There was no mention of what was required to refine perfect spirit weapons in all the ancient books in Ethereal Peak. Who would have thought that a disciple of Ethereal Peak would attempt to create a perfect spirit weapon after countless years? Sima-ji declared loudly in ridicule, to quench a perfect spirit weapon, you will have to use the rarest spirit liquid such as Northern Frost Ice, Deep Sea Fiend Oil or Zenith Spring Water. Unfortunately, you have none of those. Ha 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 ha. Many golden cores were secretly stunned. Each of the 3 items that Sima-ji mentioned were extremely rare and were not cheaper than supreme-grade spirit weapons. To think that they would be required for quenching. Suzimo pulled the spirit saber out of the boiling water. He was expressionless and he did not do anything else. Upon seeing that, everyone knew that Suzimo had not prepared those items in advance and could not help but sigh. A perfect spirit weapon was about to be born before their eyes, only to fail at the final step. Xianyi clutched his wrist and let out a long sigh with a pained expression. Ji Yaoshua looked at Suzimo, who was silent, and felt her heart wrench. She quickly turned her head and shouted, "Father, help him." The emperor said in a deep voice, "Ming Zi, head to the palace's treasury. There should be Zenith Spring Water in it." "It's too late." Sima-ji pointed at the spirit saber in Suzimo's hand and sneered, "In 5 breaths' time, if there is no quenching item, that saber will be wasted." Everyone focused their attention. The spirit patterns were already showing signs of dissipating on that fiery red saber. It was clearly too late to retrieve the Zenith Spring Water at this point. "Suzimo, you're still too naive." "Foo foo foo foo." Sima-ji laughed. He was delighted because with this failure, the light of providence on Suzimo would disintegrate and it would be difficult for him to refine another perfect spirit weapon ever again. This failure would not only waste a saber, but destroy a monstrous weapon refinement master as well. Ji Yaoshua stood up, prepared to head forward to comfort Suzimo. Right then, Suzimo narrowed his gaze and a strange glint flickered in his eyes. Gripping the saber in his hands, he held it horizontally across his chest with its blade facing down. Suzimo stretched out his palm and the saber's blade landed on it, slashing across slowly and forcefully. Since he did not have any Northern Frost Ice, Deep Sea Fiend Oil or Zenith Spring Water, he would use his blood to quench the spirit saber. Sima-ji gave a disdainful stifled laughter. "What a fool. How can your blood compare to Zenith?" His eyes widened in disbelief as he could not continue anymore. "How could that be?" Suzimo's bloodline. Poof. Blood gushed from the cut and spilled onto the scarlet blade. Sheeing. A piercing sound could be heard as thick smoke rose from the saber. The temperature of the saber dipped rapidly and the spirit pattern that was about to dissipate stabilized, becoming one with the blade. Furthermore, the 5 spirit patterns were even devouring Suzimo's blood. Even though the temperature of the saber had dropped, the color of the blade was gradually deepening. It changed from the scarlet shade of flames to a grisly shade of blood. 6th step, quenching, success. Clang. Clang. The blade trembled and produced an intense clanging sound. It was filled with a strong smell of blood that made one uneasy. Suzimo caressed the blade gently, muttering softly, "Since you were quenched using my blood, you shall be called Blood Quencher from now on." As though it was sentient, the blade went silent. A perfect spirit weapon that was born from blood. Chapter 317, So Stupid That They Are Cute. Chapter 317, So Stupid That They Are Cute. That was completely unexpected. No one knew the sort of terrifying energy that was hidden in Suzimo's bloodline. Suzimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, the Void Thunder Manual, devoured a dragon and even brought his bloodline to the Blood Tsunami realm. His bloodline was much stronger than the Zenith Spring Water and whatnot. Everyone from True Fire sect was dumbfounded. A person's bloodline was comparable to rare spirit liquids such as the Northern Frost Ice and Zenith Spring Water. Before that doubt was resolved, Everyone's eyes and minds were once again drawn in by that newly blood-quenched saber. Its massive and thick blade was grisly red and eye-piercing. Branded onto the blade like blood reservoirs, the 5 spirit patterns were malefic and were akin to 5 long blood eyes that were narrowed. Even though it was merely resting on the spot, the saber gave off a murderous aura. Sima Ji rubbed his chin and murmured, that saber was made with so many rare spirit components. Now that it's perfect with 5 spirit weapons, its might should not be inferior to carnate spirit weapons. Upon hearing that, everyone's gaze towards Blood Quencher became even more passionate and greedy. Supreme-grade spirit weapons were already enough to move the hearts of golden cores and make them flock for it. A perfect spirit weapon was something that could lead to a bloody battle. If they were not in the capital of Great Jew, or at the foot of the Emperor, many golden cores would have already taken action and broke out in a wild war. Sensing that there was something unusual about the gazes and tension in the air, Su Zimo understood. A man's wealth was his own ruin by causing another's greed. With a flip of his palm, he put away Blood Quencher in his storage bag. "Mr. Mo, how much do you want for that blade? Name a price." At that moment, perfected being Yun Shan stood up and spoke. "That's right, Mr. Mo. It's a rare opportunity. How about selling that saber in an auction here? It'll definitely fetch a good price," another golden core added. Su Zimo shook his head. That saber is priceless. Even though he had managed to refine that perfect spirit weapon successfully, he could not guarantee that he could replicate Blood Quencher even if he were to try again. Similar to carnate spirit weapons, perfect spirit weapons were priceless treasures. Furthermore, Blood Quencher carried his blood. "You must be joking, Mr. Mo. Everything has a price." Perfected being Yun Shan refused to give up and continued, "Furthermore, given your cultivation realm, it's going to be difficult to wield that saber, let alone utilize it to its fullest potential. You might as well sell it, Mr. Mo." Su Zimo frowned somewhat impatiently and remarked directly, "I'm sorry, the meaning of priceless is that I'm not selling it." Perfected being Yun Shan's face darkened and he snorted. If it was before this, he would have definitely not chosen to be on bad terms with Su Zimo. However, the birth of a perfect spirit weapon was way too alluring for a golden core. If he could acquire that Blood Quencher, his combat power would be doubled at the very least. Sima Ji and perfected being Kang Lang exchanged glances, both could read the coldness in the other's eyes. Su Zimo returned to his seat, holding a superior-grade spirit stone in his right hand as he recovered the spirit energy within his body slowly and rested. He had already set the bait and was waiting for the fishes to take it. In the square, the 1,000-odd weapon refinement masters began their second round of weapon refinement. Su Zimo's weapon refinement earlier on had a huge impact on those weapon refinement masters. However, while the majority of them paid attention to Su Zimo's spirit gathering technique, Shui Yi of Ethereal Peak paid attention to his tempering technique. That was because he had long known that Su Zimo's spirit gathering technique was something outsiders could not mimic. After thinking through his insights, Shui Yi felt that he had learned quite a bit and his confidence grew tremendously as he began his second round of weapon refinement. Dao Feng, who had already refined a superior-grade spirit weapon in the first round, was now conflicted. In theory, he felt that the act of removing the weapon tripod was simply courting death. However, the truth was that Su Zimo had indeed refined a perfect spirit weapon. Dao Feng hesitated for a long time before taking a deep breath. He decided to believe in his own weapon refinement technique and began the second round. Since he had already refined a superior-grade spirit weapon in the first round, it was certain that Dao Feng would already have a spot on the weapon ranking. Hence, he decided that he was going to attempt for a supreme-grade spirit weapon for the next 2 rounds. Materials selection, smelting, forging, tempering, all of them were done in one go. According to his own method, Dao Feng began spirit gathering under the protection of the weapon tripod. 1 spirit pattern. 2 spirit patterns. The 3rd spirit pattern failed. Dao Feng's expression was ugly. Su Zimo's weapon refinement had affected his mental state greatly. If he continued with his previous method, he might not even be able to refine a superior-grade spirit weapon. How about giving it a try? What if removing the weapon tripod truly brought about a higher success rate for spirit gathering? Similar thoughts flashed through Dao Feng's mind repeatedly. The more he tried to control, the more he couldn't control. I don't care anymore. Time to give it a try. Since I've already refined a superior grade spirit weapon, it doesn't matter even if I fail. At that thought, Dao Feng began his third round of weapon refinement. Materials selection, smelting, forging, tempering. At the fifth step, spirit gathering, Dao Feng suddenly removed his weapon tripod. His action naturally attracted countless gazes. Look, Dao Feng has removed his weapon tripod too. Finally, someone's going to try it. We'll know in a bit whether or not that method works. Taking a deep breath of air, Dao Feng tried his best to ensure that his mind was calm and he was in peak condition before slowly attempting for spirit gathering. Whoosh! A light flashed and the first spirit pattern was condensed successfully. Right after, another light flashed and the second spirit pattern was condensed successfully. After a while, another light flashed. The third spirit pattern was condensed successfully as well. Ah! A wave of shock and astonishment could be heard from the crowd. Seems like Su Zimo was right. Removing the weapon tripod truly increases the success rate of spirit gathering. Dao Feng also became excited, his eyes shining. As long as I gather another spirit pattern, I'll be in possession of a supreme-grade spirit weapon. At that thought, Dao Feng began on spirit gathering once more. Right then, Sima Ji, who was at the spectator area, vaguely sensed that something was amiss and he looked towards Su Zimo instinctively. At that moment, Su Zimo was watching calmly with a faint smile on his lips. Not good. Sima Ji was stunned and was about to turn around. Boom! A deafening sound could be heard in the square. Dao Feng fell to the ground with tightly shut eyes, already fainted. His body was almost riddled with holes from the fragments of the sword as blood gushed out. There was even a crushed talisman in Dao Feng's hands. It was not hard to imagine that he would have been blasted to smithereens if not for that protection talisman. Now, even if Dao Feng could survive, it would be difficult for him to recover within a short period of time, let alone enter the ancient battlefield along with everyone on the 4 ranking lists. This meant that even though Dao Feng's name would be on the weapon ranking, his spot to enter the ancient battlefield would be emptied out. Su Zimo, you plotted against True Fire Sect. Sima Ji jolted upright and glared at Sima Ji with a deep killing intent in his eyes. He took the bait willingly. Su Zimo smiled indifferently. Disciples of True Fire Sect are truly so stupid that they are cute. Chapter 318 Unlocking 3 Meridians. Chapter 318 Unlocking 3 Meridians. Once that was over, Su Zimo no longer paid attention to the sect competition in the square. Gripping spirit stones in both hands, he calmed down and recovered spirit energy. Even though he had expended his spirit and mental energy completely to refine Bloodquencher, his cultivation realm that was stuck for a long time was also showing signs of breaking through. Currently, Su Zimo was at late-stage foundation establishment, a single step away from perfected foundation establishment. Nearing noon, the weapon refinement segment was concluded and the names on the weapon ranking were out. Shui Yi did not manage to leave his name on the weapon ranking. However, he gained some insights from Su Zimo's weapon refinement process and had successfully refined a middle-grade spirit weapon as well. As such, he was extremely elated. In another 10 years, he would have a chance to contend for a spot on the weapon ranking as well. A mysterious light surged through the weapon ranking jade pillar in the northwestern corner, causing names to surface one after another. Su Zimo's was at the top. After the competition for the weapon ranking was over, there was a short break before the competition for the talisman ranking. Lung Ru was the one ethereal peak was sending out for the talisman ranking competition. She was not weak to begin with and was already a 3-meridian foundation establishment cultivator. Furthermore, she had a strong talent in terms of talisman crafting and was the only from ethereal peak who had a shot at leaving a name on the talisman ranking. Indeed, after the talisman ranking segment was over, Lung Ru managed to suppress all the other cultivators and her name was at the top of the jade pillar in the southwest corner. Right from the beginning, Leng Ru had already attracted much attention given her cold and aloof appearance that made her look like a fairy descending on the mortal realm. Now that she had obtained the first spot on the talisman ranking, she naturally drew even more admiration from everyone else. Shuiyi smiled. "Congratulations, junior sister Leng. You're so amazing. You're taking a #1 spot just like bro." Little Fatty raised his thumb and praised. "Yes," Leng Ru replied with an indifferent expression, as though even obtaining #1 on the talisman ranking did nothing to stir her heart. For some reason, Shen Mengqi felt upset when she caught sight of that. Spectator area. Many golden cores congratulated and toasted Xian Yi and Liu Hui one after another. "Congratulations, congratulations. #1 on 2 ranking list. That's ethereal peak for you." Xian Yi pretended to be reserved and replied humbly, "Not at all. It's just luck, haha." Even though he said that, Xian Yi was long overjoyed and his face was shining brightly. Liu Hui added, "We didn't bring many disciples this time round. There's not much hope left for the elixir and spirit rankings." "That's not true, fellow Daoist. The fact that Ethereal Peak has obtained #1 in 2 ranking lists is more than enough to make you guys famous through the entire Great Ju dynasty after the sect competition," a golden core replied hurriedly. In reality, Xian Yi and Liu Hui understood that the fact that they obtained #1 on 2 ranking lists was only part of the reason why these golden cores were coming forth to congratulate them. The main reason was due to Suzimo. Most cultivators would still want to be on good terms with a weapon refinement master who could refine perfect spirit weapons. True Fire Sect had tried to assassinate Su Zimo countless times. That was a blood feud and was difficult to resolve. Perfected being Kang Lang and Su Zimo's grudge was even deeper. Perfected being Kang Lang of Iridescent Cloud's Palace, Sima Ji and everyone else from True Fire Sect were expressionless. Their eyes would flash with occasional cold glints when they looked at Su Zimo and they would exchange glances between one another, seemingly plotting something. Perfected being Yun Shan of Southern Mountains Sect frowned in deep thought. Right then, Su Zimo, who was initially resting with his eyes closed, shuddered and his aura rose sharply. The spirit energy within his body surged and spewed out. Everyone felt it and turned to their sides. It was a breakthrough. Perfected Foundation Establishment. Xian Yi and Liu Hui were delighted and nodded repeatedly. Su Zimo was still not opening his eyes after a while as his spirit energy surged and was almost gathering a storm. Instead of calming down, things were getting more intense. This is his unlocking the spirit meridians directly. Throughout history, there had always been monstrous geniuses with exceptional talent that could make use of the momentum of breaking through to perfected foundation establishment to unlock spirit meridians. Of course, that was something extremely difficult to achieve and only a rare few people could unlock their spirit meridians while breaking through to perfected stage. Even if they were in possession of heaven or variant spirit roots, it was still difficult to achieve unless they cultivated some unique secret skills. Perfected being Kang Lang's heart skipped a beat. This was an extremely rare opportunity. If he could secretly interrupt Su Zimo's breakthrough process and injure his foundation severely, the latter's cultivation path in the future would be ruined. Foundation establishment, as the name suggests, was the process of building a foundation. It was the most important, and that was why there was the saying of unlocking 8 meridians. The more meridians one unlocked, the more stable their foundation would be and the greater their chances of breaking through to Golden Core realm or even producing Golden Core phenomenons. If there was a problem with the process of foundation establishment, that would be equivalent to crippling one's path of cultivation by half. Just as perfected being Kang Lang was pondering over it, the Emperor suddenly waved his sleeves. Su Zimo was dragged along with his chair to the Emperor's side before being let down gently. Throughout the entire process, Su Zimo was not disturbed in the slightest bit. The Emperor's intention was clear. He was warning those with ulterior motives that they should not harbor designs on Su Zimo. Expressionlessly, the Emperor looked towards Iridescent Cloud's palace. Perfected being Kang Lang felt guilty and pulled away the moment he met gazes with the Emperor. Boom! Suddenly, a dull thud sounded from Su Zimo's body. Under the cover of his green robes, A spirit meridian shone brightly and appeared indistinctly. Within just a few dozens of seconds, he had unlocked a spirit meridian. Xian Yi nodded silently. That was the benefit of cultivating Ethereal Peak Foundation establishment. In the past, there were even people in the sect who managed to unlock 2 spirit meridians at one go when breaking through to perfected foundation establishment. A look of approval flashed across the Emperor's eyes as he nodded. A moment later, the aura in Su Zimo's body was still rising and spirit energy gushed through his spirit meridian like a tidal wave. Could he be trying to unlock the second spirit meridian? Ethereal Peak's 3 major secret skills are truly impressive. Bang! 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 Explosions sounded from Su Zimo's body repeatedly. Indeed, his spirit energy surged like a tsunami in a terrifying manner and was charging towards a second spirit meridian. Each time his spirit energy coursed through, his meridians would expand. The meridians in his body were like river channels. If his initial spirit energy was compared to a stream, it was now like a massive river with a surging momentum after it was expanded. Boom! Yet another dull thud. A second meridian appeared. He did it. Xian Yi clenched his fists and cheered softly. As the spirit energy in Su Zimo's body gradually calmed down, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. All of a sudden, an even more terrifying aura burst forth and a third spirit meridian appeared faintly beneath his green robe. Bang! 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 The charging was still continuing. The retraction earlier on was merely to accumulate strength. Once the accumulation was done, it would burst forth for a third spirit meridian in an even more ferocious manner. This time, even Xian Yi was flabbergasted. Was he trying to unlock 3 spirit meridians in one go? The Emperor's mouth opened slightly as shock flashed across his eyes. She looked over as well, her beautiful eyes filled with surprise and curiosity. What spirit root did that Su Zimo possess? How could the spirit energy that he had cultivated be so pure? Chapter 319, Fiend Demon. Chapter 319, Fiend Demon. Su Zimo was still attempting to break through his third spirit meridian. On the square, the competition for the elixir ranking came right on the heels of the competition for the talisman ranking. This time, Ethereal Peak did not send any disciples, but Su Xiaoning of Azure Frost Sect was taking part. Initially, Su Xiaoning's elixir refinement skills were not enough for her to leave a name on the elixir ranking. However, ever since she obtained that mysterious elixir furnace, Su Xiaoning would become extremely focused with every elixir refinement and could reach her peak condition. During the sect competition this time, Su Xiaoning managed to refine a perfect grade elixir once again and clinched the first spot on the elixir ranking in a shocking fashion. With the end of the competition for the elixir ranking, it meant that 3 ranking lists were done. 30 cultivators who were qualified to enter the ancient battlefield were already chosen. Naturally, the most watched event of the sect competition was still the spirit ranking contest. The competition for the spirit ranking was not the most common one-on-one format. Instead, it would be held in a completely foreign environment where birds and beasts tread and dangers lurked. In that massive battle royal, 10 champions would be decided. The location for the spirit ranking competition was extremely particular as well. It was held within a dharmic weapon possessed by the Emperor, the 5 Elements umbrella, where a world of its own was formed within. It could accommodate hundreds of thousands of living beings and was extremely obscure. The 5 Elements umbrella was divided into 5 major regions of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. There were grade 4 killing formations separating the different regions and they could not be crossed. Out of balance, each sect could only send 5 cultivators at most to participate in the spirit ranking competition. The participating cultivators would be dragged into the 5 Elements umbrellas and fight in their respective regions until 2 people remained. After the battle royal of the 5 regions ended, the remaining 2 people of each region would get to leave their names on the jade pillar of the spirit ranking. Since the purpose was to enter the ancient battlefield, the 10 remaining cultivators on the spirit ranking would not continue to fight one another and there was no distinction between the rankings. Of course, each cultivator would receive a talisman before entering the 5 Elements umbrella. If they crush the talisman, They would be teleported out of the 5 elements umbrella instantly, but that would also mean they are disqualified from competing for the spirit ranking. This time, there were no 6 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators in the sect competition. Each of the 5 major sects had a 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators, the other sects had 2 in total, and there was an itinerant cultivator as well. There were a total of 8 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators. The Emperor would definitely spread the 8 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators to different regions. As for the allocation of 3 and 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators, it would be more casual relatively. What was worth mentioning was that even 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators may not survive till the end given the complex nature of the 5 elements umbrella. There were no lack of 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators who managed to leave their names on the spirit ranking for each sect competition. All the cultivators taking part in the spirit ranking competition, step forward. With a command from the Emperor, cultivators stepped out from the crowd one after another into the sunken area. At a glance, there were around 5,000 of them. These 5,000 cultivators were the elites of their respective sects, but only 10 of them would be selected in the end. Jun Hao of Azure Frost Sect, He Jiang of True Fire Sect, Sai Yutong and Shun Mengqi of Iridescent Clouds Palace, Shi Jian of Southern Mountains Sect and Ji Chengtian and Little Fatty of Ethereal Peak were naturally among them. The Emperor waved his sleeves and a bright light flew towards the 5,000 cultivators in the square. Raining on them, it turned into jade talismans. The word life was etched on the jade talismans. The meaning was obvious. Cultivators would be able to leave the 5 elements umbrella alive as long as they were to crush the jade talismans. The Emperor nodded and perfected Lord Ming Zi understood before shouting, "The reason why all of you are placed in a battle royal within the 5 elements umbrella during the spirit ranking segment for each sect competition is so that you can have a taste of what the ancient battlefield is like beforehand. I'm not going to talk about the rules, but I have some points to remind everyone about. First, don't attempt to cross the regions. There are grade 4 killing formations separating the different regions. Even golden cores who enter them are bound to die. Second, the 5 elements umbrella is extremely dangerous. Apart from your competitors, there are many birds and beasts. While those are ordinary spirit demons, some of them have survived for tens of thousands of years and their strength is at the peak of the Foundation establishment realm. The only reason why they aren't able to form a core is due to the repression from your Majesty's dharmic powers. When they heard that, many cultivators' hearts skipped a beat. At the peak of Foundation establishment, spirit demons had the ability to kill them. Perfected Lord Ming Zi continued, although you are all in possession of the Jade Talisman, there have been incidents in previous sect competitions where cultivators were attacked and killed before they could crush their Jade Talismans. At that point, Perfected Lord Ming Zi paused for a brief moment. Those who wish to withdraw now, there is still time. Once you enter the 5 elements umbrella. Even though Perfected Lord Ming Zi did not continue, his meaning was clear. Right then, a cold voice rang from outside the cloud. How can my Blood Crow Palace miss out on the spirit ranking competition? On the square, the crowd dispersed, forming a passageway. 2 cultivators walked over one after another. The person in the lead wore pitch-black long robes and his black hair was scattered casually, sharp as an eagle, his eyes shone with a crimson red. Blood Crow Palace. Those words seemed to have a hint of blood to it as the expressions of many golden cores present changed, a tinge of fear flashed across their eyes. The Emperor's face was impassive as he sent his spirit consciousness to scan the person before him. However, it was reflected by a similar energy. Nascent soul realm. The Emperor frowned slightly and checked with his spirit consciousness. That person should undoubtedly be a nascent soul. However, for some reason, he felt that something was amiss, as though there was something strange about that person. Turning his head, the Emperor looked towards Perfected Lord Ming Zi. Perfected Lord Ming Zi shook his head as well. Suddenly, a soft voice sounded in the Emperor's mind. That's a fiend demon. His true form is a crow on Black Crow Mountain. Ji Shi, the chief steward of Sky Treasure Auction House, had sent a voice transmission to the Emperor using her spirit consciousness. That was a technique that only nascent souls could use, and only those involved in the voice transmission could hear it. At the mention of fiend demon, the Emperor's eyes were filled with killing intent. Demons that did not have sentience were called wild beasts. Demons who had gained sentience and knew how to cultivate with strength equivalent to chi refinement warriors were called spirit beasts. If they had strength equivalent to foundation establishment cultivators and golden cores, they were called spirit demons. If they had strength greater than golden cores, at the nascent soul or even void reversion realm, they were called fiend demons. Once a demon forms a demonic core, they could alter their bone structures and take on human form. However, even if golden cores were to take on human form, they could not conceal the demonic chi from their bodies, and any cultivator would be able to recognize them. It was only when a demon cultivated yin spirit, similar to a cultivator's nascent soul, that they could mobilize their spirit consciousness and wield dharmic powers to conceal their demonic chi. Such demons would be able to take on human form and live among humans and even cultivators without being revealed at all. Unless one had unique dharmic weapons or secret skills, cultivators of the same level would not be able to detect them at all. Cultivators referred to such demons as fiend demons. Chapter 320, I'll Take Your Dog Life. Chapter 320, I'll Take Your Dog Life. Once fiend demons infiltrated amongst cultivators, they would pose an immense threat. Normally, if a fiend demon were to be exposed, especially if it was in the capital of Great Jew, the emperor would definitely be enraged and kill it right away. However, that fiend demon came from Blood Crow Palace. The palace lord of Blood Crow Palace had a mysterious background, and it was very likely that he came from a forbidden ground of Qianhuang mainland's north region. If it was a living being of Qianhuang's forbidden ground, the fiend demon before them must have already submitted to the palace lord of Blood Crow Palace. Even though he was the emperor of Great Jew, it was still difficult for him to attack. The black-robed man did not cup his fists nor did he bow. He merely said indifferently, "My name is Shui. It shouldn't be too late for me to bring Blood Crow Palace's eldest disciple to take part in the spirit ranking competition." Upon hearing the words Shui, the emperor realized that she was not wrong. This should be the previous overlord of Black Crow Mountain, the Blood Crow King. If you want to take part in the spirit ranking competition, you just have to take the Jade Talisman and enter the 5 Elements umbrella. The emperor pondered for a moment before tossing out a Jade Talisman that landed in front of the black-robed man. The Blood Crow King turned slightly, revealing the man behind him. It was an extremely handsome man whose mouth was slightly curled. He looked arrogant and there was a faint, eerie green light that shone from his eyes. "It's you, Feng Haoyu." At that moment, an angry bellow sounded from the square. The few disciples of Ethereal Peak glared angrily. Even Lang Ru's eyes flickered with a killing intent as her expression turned colder. The handsome man behind the Blood Crow King was none other than Ethereal Peak's traitor disciple, Feng Haoyu. At the mention of Feng Haoyu, Su Zimo, who was still breaking through his third spirit meridian beside the emperor, frowned, but he did not open his eyes. Xian Yi and Liu Hui's expressions changed as they slammed the table and stood up. 3 years had passed since the battle at Dongling Valley, but they still did not know who the mysterious faction that attacked the sect was. But now that Feng Haoyu had appeared, the mysterious faction had shown its face as well. It was Blood Crow Palace. Xian Yi's face was cold as ice. "Blood Crow Palace, you're responsible for ambushing and killing the disciples of Ethereal Peak at Dongling Valley?" The Blood Crow King glanced at Xian Yi indifferently and snorted. "So what if we did? Does Ethereal Peak still want revenge? A life for a life. You killed someone from Ethereal Peak, so you'll have to pay with your life." Liu Hui hollered angrily. The Blood Crow King shook his head. "How foolish. You don't even know that Ethereal Peak's about to be doomed. Since the young master of Blood Crow Palace died in Dongling Valley, all the disciples of Ethereal Peak will have to be buried with him. How dare you?" Liu Hui's expression changed starkly. "Here." The sinister laughter of the Blood Crow King sent chills down one's spine. If not for the fact that the palace lord of Blood Crow Palace was severely injured by the dragon race 3 years ago, he would have killed Ethereal Peak long ago. let alone wait till now. However, that was naturally something the Blood Crow King wouldn't say. Xian Yi asked loudly, Feng Haoyu, how did junior brother Wen Xian treat you? Feng Haoyu scoffed coldly. Xian Yi continued coldly, and what did you do? Deceive your own master and ancestor. How many of your fellow sect mates did you kill for your despicable act? Feng Haoyu, I'm going to kill you as revenge for our fallen comrades in Dongling Valley. Four-Peak Master Wen Xian, Little Fatty was no longer smiling cheekily like usual as he declared angrily. That's right. Kill him as revenge for Peak Master Wen Xian. Upon hearing those words, Su Zimo's body trembled slightly. Even though his eyes were still tightly shut, there was a trace of violence in his expression. You guys. Feng Haoyu's face was filled with disdain as he laughed coldly. I'm not afraid to let you guys know that I'm at 5 Meridian Foundation establishment right now. Even if you come at me together, you're not my match. Kill me. Ha ha ha. Make sure you don't lose your own lives in the 5 Elements umbrella. Boom. Right then, there was a loud bang beside the Emperor as 3 spirit meridians shone brightly and spirit energy surged. A figure rose slowly, bearing a dark gaze. His entire body exuded a fierce and murderous aura. The unexpected appearance of Blood Crow Palace almost had everyone forgetting about Su Zimo's existence. Even though Su Zimo merely stood up in a simple manner, the cultivators felt as though a dark cloud had descended upon them. The Blood Crow King and Feng Haoyu's expressions changed when they saw Su Zimo. Well. The Blood Crow King was stunned for a moment before slowly regaining his senses. He burst into laughter. To think that you would dare show yourself still. Nobody can save you today. A resentful look flashed across Feng Haoyu's eyes. Back then, being defeated by Su Zimo was the greatest humiliation in his eyes. Expressionlessly, Su Zimo left his seat and walked down the steps to the side of Xian Yi and Liu Hui. He asked in a low voice, Peak Master Wen Xian is dead? Yes. Xian Yi and Liu Hui's eyes dimmed and they nodded. Liu Hui said, back in Dongling Valley, due to Elder Yu's self-destruction of his golden core, senior brother Wen Xian was already severely injured by the time he returned with Ji Chengtian and the others. That battle was way too tragic. To be fair, if not for an anomaly such as Su Zimo, everyone from Ethereal Peak would have been wiped out completely. Liu Hui's eyes turned red as she said softly, in the past 3 years, senior brother Wen Xian's injuries have not healed at all. Instead, they got worse and his face withered while he turned extremely skinny. We all knew that after the battle at Dongling Valley, he was living in endless pain and self-reproach. It was a life worse than death. 3 months ago, senior brother Wen Xian passed away and did not rest in peace. Su Zimo remained silent. Even though Peak Master Wen Xian's attitude towards him had never been good, Su Zimo could not help but feel sadness at the thought of the former's later life. Xian Yi said, Wen Xian had 2 unfulfilled wishes. One of it was for trusting the wrong person back then and luring a wolf into the sect, allowing Feng Haoyu to learn the 3 major skills. Yet, he could not take away Feng Haoyu's cultivation personally. As for the second wish, since you're here, I'll tell you. Xian Yi sighed. You know that Wen Xian has always harbored prejudices towards you because of other matters. Before he died, his mind was no longer clear, but yet he was still hung up on wanting to meet you again, to speak to you and gain your forgiveness. He even said that he wanted to impart you Ethereal Peak's secret skills personally. Unfortunately, sigh. Su Zimo's heart ached. Gritting his teeth, the coldness in his eyes intensified. I'll help Peak Master Wen Xian fulfill his wishes. After saying that, Su Zimo took a deep breath and turned around. He glared at Feng Haoyu in the square with an icy gaze. Feng Haoyu, I didn't manage to kill you back then. I'll take your dog life today. Both in the square and at the spectator area, many cultivators were stunned. Before everyone could understand what Su Zimo meant by that, he had already turned around and bowed deeply. Your Majesty, Su Zimo of Ethereal Peak is participating in the spirit ranking competition. The Emperor frowned. Ji Yaoshue's expression changed and she revealed worry as well. Everyone knew that Su Zimo had only just unlocked 3 spirit meridians while Feng Haoyu was at 5 Meridian Foundation establishment. The disparity in strength between the two sides was simply way too great. Furthermore, Feng Haoyu would not be the only one Su Zimo would be facing in the treacherous Five Elements umbrella. There were others as well. Chapter 321, I Can't Rest. Chapter 321, I Can't Rest. When they heard that Su Zimo was going to participate in the spirit ranking competition, many golden cores at the spectator area felt a chill run down their spines. Perfected being Kang Lang and the true fire sect elders were contemplating about how to deal with Su Zimo. They did not expect a great opportunity to present itself right before them. In the eyes of everyone, Su Zimo's entry into the Five Elements umbrella as a Three-Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator was merely courting death. If they could kill Su Zimo within the Five Elements umbrella, they ensured that they would eliminate all future troubles forever. As for perfected being Yun Shan and other cultivators, killing Su Zimo meant that they would be able to get their hands on that perfect grade blood quencher. In reality, Su Zimo had always been at the center of the storm. However, this was the Great Zhou dynasty. With the might of the emperor suppressing the entire area, no one would dare to act rashly even if they harbored evil designs. Yet, Su Zimo's decision was akin to planting himself in the midst of danger, allowing everyone a chance to steal his treasures. Perfected being Kang Lang and Sima Ji exchanged glances and tacitly walked towards the square. Perfected being Kang Lang said in a low voice, Sai Yutang, all five of you, listen up. The moment you enter the Five Elements umbrella, the first thing to do is to meet up with cultivators of True Fire Sect and join forces with them. No matter which region Su Zimo is assigned to, you have to try your best to kill him there. Do you understand? Yes. Sai Yutang and the others nodded. Shun Mangqi lowered her head with a conflicted expression. She did not say anything. Even though she had long severed her relationship with Su Zimo, she still could not bear to kill him personally. Perfected being Kang Lang narrowed his eyes and said coldly, Mengqi, I don't care what sort of a relationship you had with Su Zimo in the past. However, he killed your sect mates and is bent on being enemies with your master. You should know what you need to do. Yes, Shun Mengqi lowered her head even further and responded. When Perfected being Kang Lang heard Shun Mengqi's perfunctory tone, a baleful aura appeared on his face instantly. However, his tone turned calmer instead as he said indifferently, if you can't do it, I can arrange for someone to replace you. Upon hearing this, Shun Mengqi's heart skipped a beat. Even though she was only a Four-Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator, she had a chance of obtaining a spot in the spirit ranking. If someone were to replace her to enter the Five Elements umbrella, she would lose the rights to fight for a spot completely as well as a chance to enter the ancient battlefield. Hurriedly, Shun Mengqi replied, Don't worry, master. I know what to do. Yes. It was only then that Perfected being Kang Lang nodded in satisfaction. On the other side, He Jiang let out a chilling laugh. Don't worry, master. Once I meet Su Zimo, I'll definitely take his life and seek revenge for my younger brother. Perfected being Yun Shan was also talking to Shijian, a legacy disciple of Southern Mountains sect. However, Shijian frowned slightly as if he was against it. After a moment of silence, he finally nodded. The Blood Crow King said darkly, Haoyu, I've got a mission for you. Please speak, sir. If you truly encounter Su Zimo in the Five Elements umbrella, capture him alive. Remember, I want him alive, not dead. Understood. Spectator area. Xian Yi shook his head. Zimo, you can't go. The difference in strength between you two is great. Furthermore, Feng Haoyu has already cultivated all three of Ethereal Peak's major secret skills and you've only cultivated Ethereal Peak Foundation establishment. There's no advantage you have against him. Furthermore, you will have too many enemies once you enter the Five Elements umbrella. Zimo, everyone is targeting you right now. Blood Quencher is a perfect grade spirit weapon, something that can cause people to lose their mind. That's right. Liu Hui persuaded as well, Zimo, you're still young. Don't act rashly for that moment of impulse. Su Zimo replied, Peak Masters, please do not dissuade me. My mind is set. I'm not being impulsive, I'm just glad to have the chance to seek revenge. I can't rest as long as Feng Haoyu's alive. Xian Yi and Liu Hui exchanged glances, both could tell of the helplessness in the other's eyes. Ji Yaoxue could feel Su Zimo's determination and knew that it would be futile even if she tried to dissuade him. Shaking her head, she looked at the emperor in a pleading manner. Even though the emperor could not openly be biased towards Su Zimo, he could still render some subtle help. In all honesty, the emperor was rather curious. He wanted to make use of the spirit ranking competition to check out the extent of Su Zimo's strength. First, there was the assassination attempt from 2 golden cores of True Fire sect. Next, there was Dai Shu's death. Both incidents were extremely strange and indicated that Su Zimo's strength was far from what it seems on the surface. However, Ji Yaoxue's pleading eyes softened the emperor's heart as he lamented internally, "Forget it." Demoness Ji remained silent the entire time as she quietly moved her seat back beside Ji Yuxi. Obtaining a jade talisman from the emperor, Su Zimo came before Ji Chengtian and Little Fatty. He secretly stuffed a storage bag in both their hands and whispered, "There's an offensive and defensive supreme-grade spirit weapon within the storage bags." Upon hearing that, the eyes of both Ji Chengtian and Little Fatty lit up. He was a 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator to begin with. Now that he had an additional offensive and defensive supreme-grade spirit weapon on hand, as long as he was not surrounded, no one should be a match for him one-on-one. Little Fatty blinked his beady eyes. Just as he was about to ask, Su Zimo spoke first, "Yours is a gigantic axe and shield." A broad smile filled Little Fatty's face. Those 2 weapons were clearly customized for him. With the gigantic axe and shield, his strength would also be nothing to scoff at. The emperor's eyes flickered and a small thick rod the size of a finger shot out from the emperor's glabella. When the rod landed in the square, it expanded rapidly, forming an umbrella-like weapon. With a bang, 5 different colors of umbrella cloths that represented metal, wood, water, fire, and earth spread from the top of the umbrella, covering half of the skies. Dharmic weapon, 5 elements umbrella. On the square, the 5,000-odd cultivators who wanted to participate in the spirit ranking competition looked up instinctively. Everyone's gaze could not help but be drawn into the multicolored umbrella cloth as their hearts pounded. That umbrella cloth was like a world of its own. Everyone is ready. Let the spirit ranking competition officially begin. The moment the emperor said that, the 5 elements umbrella started to spin. The first people to be drawn into the umbrella were the 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators in the square. The respective 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators of the 5 major sects were separated into different regions. Ji Chengtian was placed in the water region. Including Feng Haoyu, there were 4 other 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators left on the square. This meant that there would be a region within the 5 elements umbrella that would only have a single 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. That way, the pressure provided by the 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator of this region would be extremely small and basically, anyone could obtain a spot on the spirit ranking as long as they held through to the end. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 4 figures rose into the air and entered 4 regions. Su Zimo kept his eye on Feng Haoyu and saw him enter the gold region. Apart from Feng Haoyu, there was another 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator in the gold region, He Jiang of True Fire sect. As for the water region where Ji Chengtian was located, he was the only 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. Everyone knew what was going on when they saw the allocation. It meant that the emperor intended to take care of Ethereal Peak. The 5 elements umbrella continued spinning. The cultivators in the square flew into the world within the 5 elements umbrella. A massacre was about to begin. Chapter 322, Disregard. Chapter 322, Disregard. The remaining 5,000-odd people flew into the sky at the same time and were drawn in by the 5 elements umbrella that was spinning beneath the heavens. At a glance, it seemed like those 5,000-odd people were being devoured by another world. Of the 100,000-odd cultivators that were spectating, more than half of them were paying attention to Su Zimo. After all, his appearance in this sect competition had caused great commotion. Furthermore, there was already a repressed killing intent that was emanating from the square before the spirit ranking competition. Many factions were already trying their best to contain themselves. The moment they entered the Five Elements umbrella where outsiders could not interfere, massive clashes were bound to erupt. As for Su Zimo, whichever region he was sent to would definitely result in the most intense clashes. Look! Junior brother Su has entered the water region. Shuiyi pointed to the sky and said excitedly. Lung Ru's expression relaxed and she heaved a sigh of relief. There were no other 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators in the water region apart from Ji Chengtian of Ethereal Peak. It was the region with the least threat and was relatively safer. As long as Su Zimo and Ji Chengtian could meet in time and join forces, they should be able to last till the end in the water region. Perfected being Kang Lang and the others frowned. It was clear that the Emperor's arrangements were to protect Su Zimo. The Blood Crow King scoffed coldly. Xian Yi and Liu Hui looked at the Emperor gratefully, but they could not express their feelings directly. After the 5,000-odd cultivators were sucked into the Five Elements umbrella, the Emperor's glabella shone with a divine light and an invisible force landed on the Five Elements umbrella. It gradually stopped spinning and the umbrella surface spread in all directions, expanding as though it was fusing into one with the heaven. Ah, look! There's senior brother he. Wow! A golden bird just flew across the sky. On the surface of the umbrella, the 5 regions shone with different lusters, forming a gigantic screen of light. Through that gigantic screen, the cultivators outside could see everything within the Five Elements umbrella clearly, including the flora, fauna, birds, and beasts. In fact, they could even observe every single action of the cultivators within. Cultivators who were taking part in the sect competition for the first time were deeply amazed when they witnessed such a scene. Look, Su Zimo is there. Fufu, his luck is truly bad. To think that he would have landed in the forest. The landing location for everyone that entered the Five Elements umbrella was random. Upon landing, it was very common to see fights break out immediately if they were close to other people. Of course, that was still a considerably alright situation. Landing in the forest was the most fatal. The forest could be considered as a lair for spirit demons where dangers lurked everywhere. All kinds of powerful spirit demons awaited and one could not guarantee that they could walk out alive if they were descended upon the forest. If one was unlucky and landed right beside a powerful spirit demon, they might be crept on stealthily by the latter and die without a chance to even crush their escape jade talisman. Hey! There seems to be a spirit lion not far behind Su Zimo and it's staring at him. If the #1 weapon refinement master of the Great Ju dynasty were to be bitten to death by a spirit demon in the Five Elements umbrella, that's going to be the greatest joke in the entire cultivation world. Hee hee. A gentle breeze blew past and the leaves behind Su Zimo swayed lightly, producing a sound. He seemed oblivious to it. All of a sudden, a massive black shadow lunged over with an opened mouth, baring its white fangs and howling deeply as it bit towards Su Zimo's neck. The ferocious face of the spirit lion seemed as though it was right in front of everyone. Ah! In the square, the crowd exclaimed. Many cultivators felt as though they were witnessing the grisly sight of Su Zimo's neck being snapped. Even though the spirit lion was about to close in, Su Zimo did not even turn back. Suddenly, he swung his arm backwards as though it was boneless like an elephant's trunk. Piak. The sound of bones cracking could be heard from the spirit beast's chin when it was struck. Right after, everyone watched as the spirit lion was sent flying back even faster than it was lunging forth. By the time it landed on the ground, its face was already smashed to bits and was unrecognizable. Twitching unconsciously on the ground, it was clear that the spirit lion was dead. As for Su Zimo, he continued walking forth without even turning back, as though nothing had just happened. In the square, the crowd was dumbfounded. What sort of strength did he possess to be able to smash a spirit demon's jawline? Before that question could be answered, another bloodthirsty wolf pounced forward only to be punched by Su Zimo. Its brains split, splattering juice all over as it died on the spot. Right after, everyone watched as Su Zimo barged through the treacherous forest with dominance, leaving nothing but a trail of corpses and blood in his wake. A gigantic spirit crocodile that was covered in spikes had been lying in ambush for a long time and had just emerged from the waters. With a single stomp on the spirit crocodile's head, Suzimo created a massive crater the size of a footprint. The gigantic body of the spirit crocodile sank into the water again, its corpse attracted other spirit crocodiles to feast on it, and before long, there was nothing left but a pile of bones. Suzimo had no intention of concealing his tracks in the jungle at all as he barged forth with complete disregard. Holy fuck. What's going on? Is that person a weapon refinement master? Bloody hell. He's a ferocious beast in human form. In the square, the 100,000-odd Foundation establishment cultivators were stunned. Wasn't it said that it was the most dangerous in the forest of the Five Elements umbrella? Wasn't it said that the spirit demons in the Five Elements umbrella were extremely strong and were close to the peak of Foundation establishment realm? I suspect that the Emperor must be afraid of trouble, so he merely put together some large-sized wild beasts into the Five Elements umbrella to scare everyone. Yes, that's possible. It's not easy to capture spirit demons, but wild beasts are everywhere. Man, he's the Emperor, but this is an utter scam. In the crowd, many cultivators whispered among themselves and looked at the Emperor with strange gazes. Although they were very soft, the Emperor could naturally hear them clearly given his cultivation. Even though he was expressionless, his eyelids were twitching uncontrollably. It was true that the spirit demons in the Five Elements umbrella were mighty and not to be underestimated. However, they were the most common types of demon beasts. The strength of a demon beast was directly related to its bloodline. Simply put, the strength of an ordinary demon beast at the peak of Foundation establishment realm was way inferior compared to the strength of an ancient remnant beast at the same cultivation realm. The difference between ordinary spirit beasts and pure-blooded ferocious beasts was even greater. For Suzimo, who had cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, Void Thunder Manual, and even devoured half a dragon, none of those ordinary spirit demons were a match for the might of his terrifying physique. If the Emperor had caught some ancient remnant beasts, they might have been able to pose some threat to Suzimo. However, there were indeed no ancient remnant beasts within the Five Elements umbrella, and the Emperor could not be blamed for that. Every ancient remnant beast out there would typically be protected by monstrous fiend demons, and it wasn't easy to capture them. A cultivator was right in his statement. Those spirit demons in the Five Elements umbrella were not facing a human, they were facing a ferocious beast in human form. Chapter 323, Unusual. Chapter 323, Unusual. In the spectator area, Demonis G was the most composed towards Suzimo's performance. Was he already so strong in melee combat back in the Bloodfiend's grave 3 years ago? Gu, she asked with a voice transmission of her spirit consciousness. No. Ji Yaoshua made use of a voice transmission technique unique to the Fiend sects and replied, "This nerd is even stronger than 3 years ago." In the spectator area, some golden cores were also discussing quietly. "PH, what's the point of having a strong physique? He won't be able to defend against the sharpness of a sword nevertheless." That's right. If he comes across cultivators, who's going to engage in melee combat with him? The Emperor sat alone in the middle and frowned as he looked at Suzimo, who was speeding forward. The direction that lad is heading, what's he trying to do? Five Elements umbrella, water region. After dashing out of the forest, Suzimo determined his direction and brushed his palm across his storage bag, summoning a flying sword before injecting spirit energy into it. Buzz. The sword quivered and 4 bedazzling lights shone from it. Supreme-grade flying sword. Right then, a shriek was heard beside him. Suzimo glanced at that person and was not bothered. Leaping onto his flying sword, he sped ahead on it. Phew! Sounds of sharp blades tearing through the void rang behind him. Narrowing his gaze, Suzimo turned his head slightly and a cold light flashed past his ears, emitting a sharp killing intent. That sword was aimed at taking his life without any mercy. Suzimo paused and turned behind. Not far behind him, the cultivator who exclaimed earlier stood with a murderous aura, his eyes shining with a deep lust and ferociousness. "You want to kill me?" Suzimo's gaze turned cold. Normally, One would not kill within the Five Elements umbrella and would let their enemies escape using the Jade Talisman if they did not bear any deep grudges. After all, the Golden Cause and the Emperor of Great Jew were watching the battle from outside. Killing enemies would sow grudges with them, and it was not a wise move. However, Su Zimo did not expect that apart from Iridescent Cloud's palace, True Fire Sect and Feng Haoyu, there were other cultivators who wanted to kill him. Su Zimo, I'm not asking for your blood quencher either. As long as you hand over that supreme-grade flying sword in your hands, I can spare your life. That person was wearing grey robes, and because he was at 4 Meridian Foundation establishment, he was naturally confident. You want the supreme-grade flying sword? Sure. Su Zimo nodded and slapped his storage bag, changing the topic. However, I'm afraid you won't be able to handle it. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Waving his robes, 3 sword beams shot out in 3 different directions, surrounding the grey-robed cultivator and blocking all paths of escape. Ah! The expression of the grey-robed cultivator changed as he yelped, 3 supreme-grade flying sword. Outside the Five Elements umbrella, a series of commotion broke out from the square and spectator area as well. Not to mention the Foundation establishment cultivators present, even most of the Golden Cause who had cultivated for hundreds of years did not possess a single supreme-grade spirit weapon. However, as a 3 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator, Su Zimo had summoned 3 supreme-grade flying swords in one go. The grey-robed cultivator was calm as spirit energy surged within him rampantly. Bursting forth with his power of 4 spirit meridians, he retrieved his flying sword and used it to defend against an incoming supreme-grade flying sword. Break. Right after, the grey-robed cultivator conjured a spirit seal and released his spirit art to defend against another incoming supreme-grade flying sword. Against the 3rd supreme-grade flying sword, the grey-robed cultivator's left arm shone with a bedazzling light, revealing a steel bracer. It was a middle-grade defensive spirit weapon. Waving his arms, the grey-robed cultivator defended against the trajectories of the 3 supreme-grade flying swords. All who dared to enter the Five Elements umbrella for the spirit ranking competition were the elites of their respective sects. None of them were easy kills. The crowd could not help but gasp when they saw the grey-robed cultivator unleash 3 consecutive attacks to deflect the 3 incoming supreme-grade flying swords. In the spectator area, the Golden Cause of Starlight Sect stroked their long beards and nodded repeatedly, remarking in calm tones, "Not bad." He did not embarrass Starlight Sect. The moment they said that, the situation within the Five Elements umbrella changed. Right as the grey-robed cultivator defended against 3 supreme-grade flying swords, Su Zimo swiped his storage bag expressionlessly and another 3 flying swords appeared before him. Buzz! The swords quivered gently, illuminating 4 spirit patterns. Another 3 supreme-grade flying swords. Upon seeing this, the crowd was in an uproar. Many Golden Cause were filled with envy and wished that they could rush into the Five Elements umbrella to snatch Su Zimo's storage bag so that they could check how much treasures were hidden within. In the final year of Mo's Spirit Weapon Workshop, after Su Zimo was able to refine supreme-grade spirit weapons, he refined one daily. In other words, there were more than 300 supreme-grade spirit weapons within his storage bag. Of the 300 items, Su Zimo had customized a set of supreme-grade flying swords for himself. The 6 flying swords that were sent out were merely a part of the set. On the battlefield, the grey-robed cultivator could not even catch his breath after defending against 3 flying swords when he was greeted with another patch of sword lights. "Why are there more?" Poof! Before he could finish his sentence, his chest was penetrated by a flying sword. Blood gushed out relentlessly as he fell to the ground with an indignant expression. The greed in his eyes had yet to dissipate and he muttered while frothing with blood foam, "Supreme-grade flying sword, supreme-grade." Upon seeing that, the Golden Cause of Starlight Sect harumphed coldly with terrible expressions. No matter what, the grey-robed cultivator was the one who attacked Su Zimo first. Even if he were to die in the Five Elements umbrella, he could not blame anyone. Waving his sleeves, Su Zimo retrieved the 6 supreme-grade flying swords and sped into the distance. He hadn't set off for long when he was blocked by another 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator. Without a single word, Su Zimo waved his hand and 6 supreme-grade flying swords flew out. The person on the other end had just summoned his flying sword when his vision blurred and 6 shimmering flying swords with 4 spirit patterns on them charged at him. Immensely frightened, the person dropped his flying sword and swapped out a gigantic shield. He channeled his 4 meridian spirit energy and the shield expanded, defending in front of him. Clang! The 6 flying swords struck the shield at almost the same time and gave out a loud bang. Poof! The person spat out fresh blood and was sent flying, his face extremely pale. He crushed his jade talisman in midair. A power radiated from the jade talisman, teleporting that man out of the 5 elements umbrella. Landing in the square slowly, the cultivator's mouth was still flowing with fresh blood. A golden core of aqua mirror sect rushed forth and took out an elixir to stuff in that person's mouth. Master, I've let you down. The cultivator's eyes dimmed as he slumped his head dejectedly. The golden core of aqua mirror sect sighed and replied exasperatedly, it's not your fault, that Su Zimo is way too despicable. He's clearly being a bully by summoning 6 supreme-grade flying swords at one go. No one would be able to take that. Even though that person was a 4 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivator and was much stronger than Su Zimo in terms of spirit energy, the difference between them was compensated by the brute force of the 6 supreme-grade flying swords. Apart from Ji Chengtian, there were no 5 Meridian Foundation establishment cultivators within the 5 elements umbrella who could stand in Su Zimo's path. As time went by, not only did cultivators fail to kill Su Zimo, they were sent out one after another, losing their chance of vying for a spot in the spirit ranking. At the same time, some golden cores were frowning as they gradually realized that there was something unusual about the direction Su Zimo was heading in. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.